It began with a town that felt trapped between breaths. Houffalize lay curled beside the Ourthe River, like something fragile, trying to stay warm. Its stone houses pressed close together, against hills wrapped in pine and frost. Snow covered the rooftops in uneven layers, disturbed only by drifting ash and the faint tremble of distant artillery. The town had no grand walls, no ancient fortress, no reason to be famous. And yet, in the final weeks of the Battle of the Bulge, Houffalize became a place where the weight of an entire offensive collapsed inward. The winter had already taken its toll. Trees stood splintered and stripped bare. Roads were chewed apart by tanks and frozen solid overnight. The river moved slowly, dark beneath thin ice that cracked and groaned like something alive. Civilians hid in cellars, listening to the sky shake, wondering which wall would fall next. Houffalize was not chosen because it was strong. It was chosen because everything passed through it. German columns, retreating from the failed Ardennes offensive, funneled toward the town in desperate waves. Armor battered and low on fuel limped through narrow streets. Trucks packed with wounded rattled over broken stone. Infantry stumbled forward with exhaustion etched into every movement. Officers shouted orders. No one had the strength to follow properly. The town became a knot of retreat, tangled, frantic, and dangerously exposed. Above it all, Allied aircraft circled. The sky no longer belonged to the ground. As the weather finally cleared after weeks of cloud and snow, sunlight revealed a landscape the air forces had been waiting to strike. Roads leading into Houffalize were packed with vehicles. Bridges strained beneath the weight of retreat. Smoke from burning fuel depots rose in thick columns that pointed directly to the chaos below. Then the attacks began. Fighter bombers screamed down out of clear blue skies, their engines cutting through the cold air like tearing metal. Rockets slammed into columns of vehicles, ripping steel apart and scattering debris across snow-covered fields. Bombs shook the valley, sending shockwaves through frozen earth. The sound echoed endlessly between the hills, trapping noise the same way the town trapped men. On the ground, panic spread faster than fire. Vehicles crashed into one another on icy roads. Drivers abandoned trucks that refused to start. Soldiers dove into ditches as explosions ripped through columns just seconds before they passed. Wounded men cried out in the snow as medics fought through chaos to reach them. Horses bolted. Ammunition cooked off in burning vehicles, snapping and popping like gunfire long after the planes had passed. And still the retreat continued because stopping meant death. American units advancing from multiple directions tightened the pressure. Infantry moved through forests, heavy with snow, boots crunching softly beneath pine needles, frozen stiff. Tanks rolled forward cautiously, their engines echoing through valleys that magnified every sound. Artillery observers watched the roads leading into Houffalize, calling down fire on intersections choked with retreating forces. The town became a battlefield not because anyone wanted to fight there, but because no one could escape it. Houses collapsed under shellfire, church walls cracked, streets filled with rubble and smoke. The riverbanks were littered with wreckage half frozen into the ice. Night brought no rest, only darker fear as fires lit the sky in dull orange pulses. For the German soldiers, Houffalize felt like the end of the road. For the Americans, it felt like closing a fist. The battle was not defined by grand charges or heroic speeches. It was defined by exhaustion, by confusion, by the grinding pressure of air and ground forces working together to crush what remained of a broken offensive. Hour by hour, the pocket tightened. Escape routes vanished. Fuel ran dry. Command structures collapsed. And the town absorbed it. All the noise, the fear, the final unraveling of momentum that had once threatened to split the Allied front in two. When the fighting finally eased, Houffalize barely resembled a town at all. Snow-covered twisted metal and shattered stone, smoke drifted lazily above ruins that still radiated heat. The river carried fragments of wood and debris past banks scarred by fire. Silence returned, not peaceful, but stunned. The Battle of Houffalize was not a victory shouted from rooftops. It was a conclusion, the moment when the Bulge folded in on itself and the war's direction became irreversible. Tonight, we return to that frozen valley, to the roads packed with retreat, to the sky that turned deadly clear, to the river that flowed quietly beside chaos, to a town that bore the weight of an army's collapse. Before we continue deeper into this story, I want to ask you something gentle, something grounded in your own moment. Where in the world are you listening from right now? And what hour has settled around you? Is it late and quiet where you are? Or does the night still hum softly? And something deeper, unique to this episode, Houffalize reminds us that sometimes the most important moments happen at the end of a struggle, when everything finally gives way. In your own life, has there been a moment when letting go rather than pushing forward changed everything for you? If you feel comfortable, share what that moment taught you. And if these long, steady journeys into the past help your thoughts slow, your breathing soften, or your mind drift toward rest, consider subscribing. December 15th, 1944. The morning mist clings to the cobblestones of Houffalize's Market Square as farmer Henri Bodson guides his cart toward the town centre, the wooden wheels clattering against stones worn smooth by 6 centuries of commerce. He watches his breath crystallize in the bitter cold, unaware that he is witnessing the final peaceful sunrise this ancient Belgian crossroads will ever see. 15 kilometres to the east, beyond the dark wall of the Ardennes forest, 410,000 German soldiers crouch in absolute silence, their Panzer engines idling cold, awaiting the order that will transform this sleepy market town into the hinge point of Hitler's last desperate gamble. The war has passed through Belgium twice already in this conflict, but Houffalize has remained largely untouched, a quiet backwater where the Ourthe River cuts through steep valley walls and where 2 critical roads converge in ways that military planners on both sides have noticed but civilians cannot yet comprehend. By sunset tomorrow, nothing here will ever be the same. Houffalize sits in a geographic cage of its own making. The town occupies the narrow floor of the Ourthe River Valley, hemmed in by forested ridges that rise steeply on both sides, creating a natural bottleneck that funnels all north-south traffic through its ancient streets. Route N15 runs from Bastogne northward to Liège, the main artery connecting the American supply depots in the south to the front lines pressing toward Germany. Route N30 crosses perpendicular, linking La Roche in the west to Saint-Vith in the east, forming a junction that military logistics officers recognize as irreplaceable. The river itself presents another constraint. For 12 kilometers in either direction, no other crossing can accommodate the weight of tanks and heavy vehicles. At 330 meters elevation, the valley bottom creates a natural corridor, while the surrounding highlands, thick with pine and oak, offer perfect concealment for artillery and observation posts. 2,800 Belgian civilians live here, most farming the valley slopes or working in the small shops that line the main square. They know their town is strategically located, positioned equidistant, 25 kilometers from both Bastogne and Saint-Vith. But strategy is an abstraction when you're hanging Christmas decorations and preparing for the Feast of St. Catherine. The weather has turned brutal. For 3 days, temperatures have plunged below -8 degrees Celsius, and the forecast promises worse. 40 centimeters of snow blanket the Ardennes, transforming the region into a frozen wilderness where movement becomes agony and vehicles churn through drifts that swallow roads whole. The clouds hang low and heavy, creating a ceiling below 300 meters that grounds aircraft and reduces visibility to a few hundred paces. In the town's small cafe, owner Marcel Durant serves coffee to the handful of customers who've braved the cold, listening to BBC radio broadcasts that speak of Allied advances toward the Rhine and predictions that the war will end by spring. His daughter, 16-year-old Marie, practices Christmas carols on the piano in the corner, the familiar melodies echoing off walls that have stood since the 15th century. None of them notice the subtle changes beyond their valley. The unusual absence of birds in the forest, the way sound seems to carry differently through air, saturated with moisture and tension, the distant rumble that could be thunder but isn't. Beneath this pastoral surface, cracks of awareness have begun to appear. Jean-Baptiste Desnaux, the town's mayor, sits in his office, reviewing a disturbing report from the Armée Secrète, the Belgian resistance network that maintains 47 operatives throughout the region. Yesterday, one of their couriers overheard German motorcycle reconnaissance along the eastern approaches, the distinctive sound of BMW engines that shouldn't be anywhere near this supposedly quiet sector. When Desnaux brought his concerns to the American liaison officer stationed in Bastogne, he was politely dismissed. The 8-Corps intelligence summary rated this sector as quiet and suitable for rest and refit of units battered in the Hürtgen forest. The 28th Infantry Division holds the line east of town with barely 6,000 men, stretched across a front that doctrine says requires 20,000. But doctrine is written for normal times, and nothing about winter 1944 feels normal to those paying attention. The resistance has logged 37 instances of unusual German activity in the past week. Bridging equipment moved forward, artillery pieces registering ranges on Crossroads, officers conducting reconnaissance disguised as enlisted men. Each individual report seems insignificant, but assembled together they form a picture that terrifies those trained to read such signs. The civilian evacuation has already begun, though few realize it. Throughout the day of December 15th, a steady trickle of trucks and carts flows westward, carrying families who sense something wrong in ways they cannot articulate. Old Leon Henrard, who survived the First World War's occupation, tells anyone who'll listen that the Germans are coming back, pointing to the same atmospheric pressure, the same eerie quiet that preceded the Kaiser's armies in 1914. Most dismiss him as a traumatized old man, but by late afternoon, perhaps 300 residents have quietly departed, reducing the town's population to around 2,500. Those who remain prepare in small ways, moving valuables to cellars, stockpiling food, whispering prayers in the Church of St. Catherine, whose 12th century stones have witnessed empires rise and fall. Marie Durant practices her carols with particular intensity, as if music might ward off the darkness gathering beyond the valley walls. Her father watches her with a sadness he cannot explain, memorizing the sound of her voice in this moment before everything changes. As darkness falls on December 15th, the town settles into an uneasy sleep. The temperature drops to -12 degrees, and ice forms on windows in geometric patterns that fracture lamplight into thousands of tiny prisms. In the forests 15 kilometers east, German artillery officers complete their final calculations, marking crossroads, bridges, and assembly areas on maps with coordinates that will guide shells to their targets when dawn comes. The 410th Infantry Division, fresh from garrison duty in Denmark, moves into assault positions with the nervous energy of troops who've trained for this moment but never experienced combat. Behind them, the 2nd Panzer Division and the 116th Panzer Division idle their engines in carefully camouflaged positions, drivers checking fuel levels and gunners test traversing turrets one final time. The silence is absolute, enforced by officers who know that noise discipline in these final hours means the difference between surprise and failure. Even the usual sounds of an army preparing for battle, the clank of mess kits, the low conversation of nervous men, have been suppressed into a stillness that seems to compress the winter air itself. The last civilian truck leaves Houffalize at 1700 hours on December 15th, carrying the Rousseau family westward toward the relative safety of Liège. 7-year-old Antoine Rousseau watches from the rear of the truck as his hometown recedes into the gathering gloom, the warm lights of the shops and homes creating a constellation of human presence in the darkening valley. He will remember this image for the rest of his life, the town whole and alive. Smoke rising from chimneys, the church tower silhouetted against the winter sky. By the time he sees Houffalize again, 3 years later, he will need a map to identify where his home once stood. But in this moment, he simply waves goodbye, thinking he'll return after Christmas when whatever threat his parents fear has passed. The truck's tires crunch through fresh snow, leaving tracks that will be covered by morning. Behind them, the Crossroads settles into its final hours of peace. In the German-occupied town of Prüm, 28 kilometers east of Houffalize, General Hasso von Manteuffel conducts his final commanders' conference for the 5th Panzer Army. Spread before him is a detailed map of the Ardennes, and his finger traces the planned route of advance. Breakthrough at multiple points, rapid exploitation through the Ourthe Valley, crossing at Houffalize by day 3, then the dash for the Meuse River, and ultimately Antwerp. The plan requires speed, surprise, and perfect coordination. It also requires capturing Houffalize intact, with its bridges undestroyed, to maintain the momentum that will carry his armour to the sea. Von Manteuffel is a realist among dreamers, a professional soldier who understands that this offensive represents Germany's last mobile reserves, being thrown against an enemy with virtually unlimited resources. But he also knows that wars are not decided solely by materiel counts, that audacity and surprise have toppled seemingly insurmountable odds before. His orders are clear. Houffalize must fall within 72 hours of our. Everything depends on that single, frozen crossroads. The town sleeps fitfully. In cellars and attics, those with premonitions keep vigil, unable to articulate their dread, but unable to ignore it. Abbé Musty, the parish priest, kneels in the church and prays for his flock, asking protection for the innocent and courage for those who will need it. He has lived through one German occupation and knows the signs. The way information stops flowing, the sudden absence of military traffic that usually indicates something is being hidden rather than truly quiet. At midnight, he walks through the empty streets, his footsteps echoing off the ancient buildings, blessing doorways in a ritual older than the war. The snow has stopped falling, and the sky has cleared, revealing stars whose light left them before humans learned to make war at this scale. In 12 hours, the greatest artillery barrage in Western Front history will begin. In 36 hours, panzer columns will enter these streets. In 6 weeks, this town will cease to exist in any recognizable form. But tonight, Houffalize is still itself, still whole, still home to 2,500 souls who sleep in beds their grandparents slept in, dreaming dreams that the morning will shatter. At 0530 on December 16th, 1944, 1,600 German artillery pieces will open fire simultaneously along an 85-kilometre front, and the Battle of the Bulge will begin. Houffalize sits at the calculated centre of this maelstrom, the town that geographic destiny has chosen as the pivot point for Hitler's last offensive. But in these final hours before dawn, it remains what it has always been. A market town where the Ourthe River runs clear and cold, where church bells mark the hours, where families have lived for generations in a peace they believe is durable because they cannot imagine its alternative. The frozen Crossroads waits, patient and unknowing, as history gathers itself for the blow that will transform everything. The last stars fade as a pale light begins to touch the eastern sky. 5 hours remain. September 16th, 1944. In the conference room of the Wolf's Lair, Adolf Hitler's East Prussia headquarters, the Führer stands before a map of Western Europe, his hand trembling slightly as his finger jabs repeatedly at a small town in Belgium. Here, he says, his voice rising with the manic energy that his generals have learnt to fear, Houffalize. This is where we reunite our armies. This is where we split the Anglo-American alliance. This is where we win the war. The assembled officers exchange glances heavy with concern and calculation. Germany's losing on all fronts. The Soviets are grinding toward East Prussia. The Western Allies have liberated France and are approaching the German border. And the strategic situation appears hopeless to anyone willing to acknowledge reality. But Hitler has never been interested in reality when fantasy offers more appealing alternatives. He has summoned his most trusted commanders to unveil Operation Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, a deliberately defensive-sounding code name for what will be the most ambitious German offensive since Kursk. The plan is breathtaking in its audacity and terrifying in its desperation. The operational concept emerges over 3 hours of intense briefing. Hitler's vision requires breaking through thinly held American lines in the Ardennes, the same forested region where German armies achieved their stunning victory over France in 1940. The plan calls for 3 armies to attack on a narrow front: 6th SS Panzer Army in the north, 5th Panzer Army in the centre, 7th Army in the south. The main effort will fall to General Hasso von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army, tasked with the fastest, deepest penetration. Their first critical objective is Sankt Vith, expected to fall within 48 hours. Their second objective is Houffalize, where the Ourthe River crossing and road junction create a natural assembly point. Von Manteufel's forces must capture this town by day 3, December 19th, to maintain the timetable that will carry them across the Meuse River and ultimately to Antwerp, 160 kilometres beyond the starting line. The capture of Antwerp, Hitler insists, will split the British and American armies, cut off Montgomery's forces, and force the Western Allies to negotiate a separate peace. Then Germany can concentrate all resources against the Soviets. Von Manteuffel listens with the careful attention of a professional who must execute the fantasies of an amateur. He is 47 years old, a veteran of the Eastern Front's brutal campaigns, and possesses a realist's understanding of modern warfare's logistics. After the meeting, he returns to his headquarters and begins the meticulous work of transforming Hitler's vision into operational orders. His 5th Panzer Army consists of approximately 90,000 men, organised into 4 panzer divisions and 3 Volksgrenadier divisions. The elite formations, the 2nd Panzer Division under Colonel von Lauschet, the 116th Panzer Division under General Waldenberg, and Panzer Lehr under General Bayerlein, will form the spearhead aimed directly at Houffalize. Each division has approximately 250 tanks, half-tracks, and assault guns, representing Germany's last mobile reserve. Von Manteuffel calculates distances, road capacities, bridge weights, fuel consumption rates, Every variable points to the same conclusion. This offensive is possible only if absolutely everything goes perfectly, and nothing in war ever goes perfectly. The fuel situation haunts every planning session. Each panzer division requires 300,000 litres of fuel to reach the Meuse River, yet supplies can provide only 150,000 litres per division. The plan depends on capturing American fuel dumps intact, a requirement that transforms hope into operational necessity. Von Manteuffel's logistics officers calculate that his armour has exactly enough fuel to reach Houffalize, but not enough to withdraw if the offensive fails. This is not a military operation, it is a gamble with national survival as the stake. The plan requires his forces to live off captured American supplies, fighting forward because retreat becomes mathematically impossible. At a conference in Bad Nauheim on November 3rd, von Manteuffel presents his modified plan to Hitler, arguing for tactical flexibility that the Führer immediately rejects. Hitler demands rigid adherence to the timetable, breakthrough on day 1, deep exploitation on day 2, Houffalize captured on day 3, Meuse crossing by day 4. Any delay will allow American reserves to seal the breakthrough. The force allocation reflects Hitler's obsession with Houffalize as the operational hinge. The 116th Panzer Division, commanded by General der Panzertruppe Siegfried von Waldenberg, receives the most direct route to the town. This division includes approximately 15,000 men, organised into 2 Panzer Grenadier regiments, 1 Panzer regiment with 120 tanks and assault guns, and supporting artillery and reconnaissance battalions. Von Waldenberg is a capable officer, a holder of the Knight's Cross, earned in savage combat on the Eastern Front, and he understands that his division has been given the mission that will decide the offensive's success or failure. His route of advance runs through the American 28th Infantry Division positions, across the Ourthe River, through Bastogne or around it, then north to Houffalize. Behind him, the 2nd Panzer Division will follow the same corridor, creating a concentrated thrust that American forces, thinly spread across the Ardennes, cannot possibly contain. At least that is the theory. Security for the operation becomes obsessive. By late November, 410,000 German troops are assembling in the Eifel region east of the Ardennes, the largest concentration of forces Germany has managed since the invasion of the Soviet Union. Moving this mass without alerting Allied intelligence requires measures approaching the paranoid. All radio traffic ceases, orders are delivered by courier only, troop movements occur only at night, with vehicles camouflaged and engines muffled. Artillery pieces are moved into position, 1 gun at a time over weeks. Soldiers are forbidden to write letters. Officers found discussing the operation, even with other officers, face immediate court-martial. The deception plan includes defensive fortification work along the Rhine River, giving Operation Wacht am Rhein its cover name, and creating the impression that Germany is preparing to defend rather than attack. Allied intelligence officers, analysing German dispositions through aerial reconnaissance and ultra-intercepts, see what they expect to see: a defeated enemy consolidating defensive positions. The possibility of a major offensive seems so unlikely that evidence pointing toward it is dismissed as deception or misinterpreted as local counterattacks. The human cost of secrecy becomes apparent in the final days before the attack. Soldiers wait in frozen forests, unable to light fires that might reveal their positions, forbidden from seeking medical care for illnesses that might compromise operational security if they were evacuated. Junior officers receive sealed orders they cannot open until hour -6. Tank crews conduct maintenance in absolute silence, wrapping tools in cloth to muffle sounds. The psychological pressure is immense. These men know they are about to participate in something enormous, but they don't know what, when, or where. Rumours circulate obsessively. They're attacking into France, they're counterattacking in Holland, they're defending the Rhine. The truth is so closely held that even division commanders don't receive final orders until December 11th, 5 days before the offensive begins. General von Waldenberg gathers his battalion commanders in a farmhouse near Prüm and spreads the maps. When they see the objective, Houffalize, and the timeline, 72 hours, several officers begin calculating aloud, then fall silent as the mathematics reveal the magnitude of what's being asked. On December 11th, the final commanders' conference takes place in Bad Münstereifel. Von Manteuffel reviews the plan one last time with his corps and division commanders. The 47th Panzer Corps, which includes the 116th and 2nd Panzer Divisions, will form the main effort aimed at Houffalize. The 58th Panzer Corps will attack farther south toward Bastogne, securing the southern flank. The question that nobody asks directly, but everyone considers, is simple: what happens if we don't capture Houffalize on schedule? Von Manteuffel has no answer, because there is no answer. The plan has no fallback, no alternative if the timetable slips. It is all or nothing, predicated on surprise, speed, and the hope that American forces are as unprepared as German intelligence believes. In the room's corner, a young captain makes a notation in his diary that will survive the war. We are attacking toward a town none of us had heard of until today. Everything depends on capturing it in 3 days. If we fail there, we fail everywhere. He is more correct than he knows. The final 48 hours before the offensive become a study in controlled tension. On December 14th, artillery units receive their ammunition allocations: 400,000 shells for the preparatory barrage, enough to fire 4,444 shells per minute across the 85-kilometre front. Forward observers infiltrate American lines, marking coordinates for key targets, command posts, communication centres, artillery positions, road junctions. The Luftwaffe, conserving strength for months, prepares to launch Operation Bodenplatte, a massive strike against Allied airfields, timed to coincide with the ground offensive. Everything is synchronised for 0530 on December 16th. At midnight on December 15th, the code phrase null tag -irons is transmitted to all units. Hour is confirmed. There is no turning back now. Von Manteuffel spends the night reviewing maps, tracing the route his divisions must take to Houffalize. The distance from the jump-off positions to the town is approximately 45 kilometres. Under ideal conditions, Panzer forces can cover that distance in half a day. But conditions will not be ideal. There will be rivers to cross, villages to clear, American resistance to overcome. And there is weather. The forecast promises fog and low clouds, perfect for concealing the attack from Allied air power, but also slowing movement and creating confusion. As December 16th dawns cold and foggy across the Ardennes, the largest secret in the European theatre is about to reveal itself. 410,000 German soldiers crouch in their assault positions, waiting for the barrage to begin. Among them are the men who will try to capture Houffalize, veterans and teenagers, fanatics and pragmatists, soldiers who believe in final victory, and soldiers who simply believe in survival. They do not know that their commanders have calculated they have fuel for advance but not retreat. They do not know that their offensive will create a bulge in Allied lines that historians will name after its shape. They do not know that Houffalize, a town most of them cannot pronounce, will become the graveyard of German military power in the West. They know only that in minutes the barrage will begin, and they will attack, and whatever happens next will be written in fire and frozen blood across the winter forests of Belgium. The plan is perfect on paper. Reality is about to begin its revisions. 0530, December 16th, 1944. In his dugout command post near Clairvaux, Luxembourg, First Lieutenant Paul Linebaugh of Company K, 3rd Battalion, 333rd Infantry Regiment, jolts awake as the earth itself seems to convulse beneath him. The sound is beyond description, beyond experience, a physical assault that transforms air into concussion and turns darkness into stuttering orange light. 1,600 German artillery pieces have opened fire simultaneously along an 85-kilometre front, and Linebaugh is directly beneath the largest portion of that barrage. The dugout shakes as if caught in an earthquake. Dirt streams from the log ceiling. The single lamp swings wildly, casting insane shadows. Outside, the world is ending in mathematically calculated increments. 400,000 shells in 90 minutes equals 4,444 shells per minute. A rate of fire not seen on the Western Front since Verdun. Linebaugh's first coherent thought is that this cannot be real, that no army could sustain such firepower. His second thought is that he needs to reach his company positions before they're annihilated. He never makes it. The barrage has been designed not merely to kill, but to paralyze. German artillery doctrine calls for Feuerwalze, the fire roller, a creeping barrage that moves forward at precise intervals, systematically destroying everything in its path. The first salvos target American artillery positions, identified through weeks of patient reconnaissance. Within minutes, the majority of American guns in the sector are destroyed or abandoned, their crews, dead or fleeing through forests, suddenly transformed into infernos of exploding trees and frozen earth, erupting in geysers of shrapnel. The second wave targets command posts and communication centers. The 28th Infantry Division headquarters loses contact with all three of its regiments within 20 minutes of the barrage beginning. The 106th Infantry Division, positioned farther north, simply ceases to exist as a functioning organization, its regiments scattered and surrounded before most soldiers even understand they're under attack. The third wave is perhaps the most psychologically devastating. Searchlights positioned behind German lines bounce their beams off the low cloud cover, creating artificial moonlight that transforms night into a ghostly twilight, where German infantry can advance, while American defenders, blinded and deafened, fire at shadows. At 07:15, the barrage lifts from the forward positions and begins walking westward. Through the artificial moonlight and drifting fog, German infantry emerge from the tree line in waves. The 116th Panzer Division's advance guard, supported by the 66th Corps' Volksgrenadier divisions, hits the 28th Infantry Division positions along the Ourthe River with overwhelming force. The Americans, what's left of them, fight with the desperate courage of men who understand they cannot win but refuse to surrender. Company B of the 110th Infantry Regiment, positioned in the village of Marnach, 18 kilometers southeast of Houffalize, finds itself in the direct path of the 2nd Panzer Division's advance. The company commander, Captain James Kennedy, has 137 men and no anti-tank weapons heavier than bazookas. Against him comes an entire panzer regiment, 90 tanks, hundreds of supporting infantry, assault guns, artillery. The mathematics are impossible, but Kennedy's orders are clear: hold Marnach at all costs. The battle that follows will become legendary in American military history, not for victory but for the price extracted from victory's opposite. Marnach becomes a slaughterhouse. For 8 hours, Company B fights from buildings, cellars, and rubble, as German tanks methodically reduce the village to debris. Bazookas fire at point-blank range, occasionally penetrating panzer armor and creating pyres of burning men and ammunition. German infantry, shocked by the intensity of American resistance, call in artillery and assault guns, transforming individual buildings into targets for concentrated bombardment. Kennedy's radio reports to battalion headquarters grow increasingly desperate. Ammunition running low, casualties mounting, enemy tanks bypassing the village to cut off retreat. At 11:30, Kennedy's final transmission is logged: "We're not driven out, we're driven in." Then silence. When German forces finally secure Marnach at 1600 hours, they find 63 American dead, 41 wounded who couldn't be evacuated, and exactly 8 unwounded prisoners. Company B has ceased to exist, but it has achieved something unexpected. It has delayed the 2nd Panzer Division's advance by 8 hours. Across the front, similar acts of desperate resistance, usually ending in annihilation, are adding minutes and hours to German timetables that have no margin for delay. By mid-afternoon, the scope of the disaster becomes apparent to American commanders. General Troy Middleton, commanding 8th Corps from his headquarters in Bastogne, stares at his situation map as coloured pins representing German penetrations multiply like a rash across the Ardennes. His corps holds an 80-kilometre front with 4 divisions, most under strength, most resting after brutal campaigns in the Hurtgen forest. Against him is coming an avalanche: 6 Panzer Divisions, 7 Volksgrenadier divisions, paratroop formations, and assault gun brigades. Middleton's communication with his forward units is fragmentary at best. The 28th Division reports enemy breakthroughs at multiple points. The 106th Division has gone silent. The 9th Armoured Division, positioned as reserve, is already being committed piecemeal to plug gaps that appear faster than they can be filled. At 1400 hours, 9 hours after the barrage began, Middleton finally realizes this is not a local counterattack but a major offensive. He telephones 1st Army headquarters and requests permission to withdraw to more defensible positions. The answer is unequivocal: hold in place. Reinforcements are coming. The race toward Houffalize is already underway, though few participants understand it yet. At 1645, a German motorcycle reconnaissance team from the 116th Panzer Division reaches the Ourthe River at Borcy, 12 kilometers east of Houffalize. The trooper in the sidecar raises his binoculars and reports what he sees. The bridge is intact, the town beyond appears undefended, the road is open. This is the moment of maximum German opportunity, the brief window when surprise and momentum could deliver Houffalize within hours rather than days. The motorcycle team leader radios his report back to division headquarters and prepares to advance. Then American artillery, fired by a battery that somehow survived the initial barrage, drops a curtain of shells across the bridge. The motorcycle team withdraws to await the main force. That brief artillery barrage, perhaps 60 shells from guns that will be destroyed an hour later, buys Houffalize another day of existence. Such are the chaotic mathematics of modern war. As darkness falls on December 16th, the first day's results are tallied on both sides. For Germany, the offensive has achieved tactical surprise beyond optimistic hopes. American frontline units have been shattered, thousands of prisoners captured, and penetrations driven deep into the Ardennes. But the operational objectives, the carefully calculated timetable, are already slipping. The 2nd Panzer Division, scheduled to reach Houffalize by dusk December 17th, is actually 22 kilometers short of that goal. The critical crossing at Clairvaux, scheduled for capture by 1000 hours, actually fell at 1830, an 8.5-hour delay. Across the front, fierce American resistance at key villages and river crossings has consumed time that cannot be recovered. For the Americans, the first day is catastrophic. An estimated 8,000 men killed, wounded, or captured from the 106th and 28th Divisions. Command and control has collapsed in multiple sectors. Entire regiments are surrounded or scattered. But the American command structure, shocked though it is, has not panicked. Eisenhower, informed of the attack at his headquarters in Versailles, immediately orders the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, resting in France after the disaster at Arnhem, to move to the Ardennes. He also orders the 3rd Armoured Division, positioned north of Aachen, to race south. The destination? Houffalize. At 2200 hours, Colonel Hurley Fuller, commanding the 110th Infantry Regiment of the 28th Division, realizes his position is hopeless. German forces have broken through on both his flanks, and his regiment, strung out across 20 kilometers of front, has been cut into isolated pockets. From his command post in Clairvaux, Fuller can hear German tanks in the streets outside. He gathers his staff for a final conference. The situation is clear. The regiment will be destroyed or captured within hours. Fuller's decision is characteristically stubborn. His men will fight where they stand, buying time for reinforcements to reach Houffalize and Bastogne. He composes a final radio message to division headquarters: "We're not driven out, we're driven in." The phrase will become famous in American military history, encapsulating the desperate courage of units that fought on past any rational hope of survival. Fuller and most of his staff are captured the following day, but elements of his regiment continue fighting from isolated strongpoints for another 72 hours, extracting a price in time that the German timetable cannot afford. The weather remains Germany's most reliable ally. Throughout December 16th, low clouds and fog keep Allied air power grounded. The 9th Air Force, with 2,800 aircraft waiting to strike, cannot fly a single sortie. The RAF's 2nd Tactical Air Force, another 1,600 aircraft, sits idle on British airfields. German columns move in daylight without fear of air attack, a luxury they have not enjoyed since Normandy. But the weather that conceals also constrains. Fog reduces visibility to 100 meters or less in many sectors, causing traffic jams as columns lose direction and collide with each other on narrow forest roads. Snow chokes secondary routes, forcing traffic onto main highways that become bottlenecks. Von Manteuffel's carefully coordinated offensive begins to lose synchronization as divisions arrive at objectives hours behind schedule. The 5th Panzer Army's war diary for December 16th notes with alarm: resistance stronger than anticipated, road conditions deteriorating, timetable requires adjustment. But there is no margin for adjustment. Houffalize must fall by December 19th. As midnight approaches, ending the first day of the offensive, both armies take stock in darkness. For German soldiers, the day has been exhilarating and exhausting. The surprise complete, the enemy reeling, the advance sweeping forward against scattered resistance. For American soldiers, those who survived, the day has been apocalyptic. Their units shattered, their friends dead or missing, their carefully prepared positions overrun by an enemy they were told was defeated. But between these extremes lies the operational reality that will decide the battle's outcome. The German offensive has advanced, but not fast enough. The American line has broken, but not collapsed. And reinforcements are racing toward the sound of guns from both sides, converging on the frozen crossroads at Houffalize, where geography and mathematics will settle what courage and determination cannot. The steamroller has achieved surprise, but surprise is not victory. The real battle is about to begin. December 17th, 1944, 09:30 hours. At his command post in Stolberg, Germany, just behind the front lines near Aachen, Major General Maurice Rose receives the most urgent order of his career. The commander of the 3rd Armoured Division, known throughout First Army as a brilliant tactician and merciless disciplinarian, reads the teletype message 3 times to ensure he understands its implications. His entire division, 18,000 men and 232 tanks, stretched across dozens of assembly areas in a rest sector, must immediately march south, 140 kilometres through narrow Ardennes roads already clogged with retreating units and civilian refugees, to block a German offensive that intelligence swore couldn't happen. Rose is 45 years old, the son of a rabbi, one of the highest-ranking Jewish officers in the U.S. Army, and a man who understands that hesitation measured in hours could mean disaster measured in divisions. He issues orders with characteristic precision. Combat commands will move independently on parallel routes. Maintenance sections will follow with recovery vehicles for inevitable breakdowns, and the division will not stop for anything short of complete mechanical failure. At 09:45, the first tanks begin rolling south. They have no idea they are racing against a German panzer column approaching the same objective from the opposite direction. That same morning, 90 kilometers to the southeast, Major Gerhard Tebbe stands in the cupola of his Panther tank and watches smoke rise from the village of Hosingen. Tebbe commands the advance guard of the 116th Panzer Division, spearheading General von Waldenberg's drive toward Houffalize. After 2 days of bitter fighting, his Kampfgruppe has finally broken through the American positions defending the Ourthe River Valley. Ahead, the road to Houffalize stretches clear and inviting, 26 kilometers of relatively straight highway through terrain that favors armor. Tebbe's orders are explicit: advance at maximum speed, bypass resistance, secure the Ourthe River crossing at Houffalize before American reinforcements can block it. He has 32 operational tanks, 12 half-tracks carrying Panzer Grenadiers, and the confidence of a veteran who has survived 3 years of combat on the Eastern Front. What he doesn't have is fuel for more than 50 kilometers of combat operations, and what he doesn't know is that American engineers and Belgian resistance fighters have spent the past 12 hours preparing a reception that will turn his advance into a nightmare of blown bridges and prepared ambushes. The geography of the Ardennes reveals itself as both armies converge on Houffalize. This is not tank country in any conventional sense. The region is a maze of steep-sided river valleys, dense forests, and narrow roads that wind through terrain where a single blown bridge or well-placed roadblock can halt an entire division. Rose's 3rd Armoured Division, approaching from the north, must navigate the narrow valley of the Ourthe River, then descend through Spa and Trois-Ponts toward the Ourthe Valley. The roads are medieval in origin, designed for horses and carts, barely wide enough for 2 trucks to pass. When a Sherman tank breaks down, as several do each hour, the entire column must halt while recovery crews manhandle 32 tons of steel off the road. Rose drives his subordinates mercilessly, appearing suddenly at traffic jams, demanding explanations, threatening relief for officers whose units fall behind schedule. His division advances at an average speed of 4.2 kilometers per hour, frustratingly slow but actually exceptional given the conditions. Each kilometer takes 15 minutes, and there are 140 kilometers to cover. Tebbe's advance meets its first serious obstacle at 0 to 300 hours on December 18th. His lead element reaches the village of Borcy, 11 kilometers from Houffalize, and discovers that the bridge over the Ourthe stream has been destroyed. The demolition is fresh, executed within the past few hours, and Tebbe immediately understands its implications. Someone knew he was coming. Someone is actively opposing his advance. He radios back to division headquarters while his engineers assess the damage. The stream is too deep and steep-sided for tanks to ford. A bypass would require cross-country movement through forests so thick that Panthers would lose their tracks on the first 100 meters. The only solution is bridging, and bridging takes time. Tebbe's division carries standard German bridging equipment, sectional metal spans that can support 50-ton vehicles, but assembling them under potential fire requires hours. As his engineers begin work, Tebbe scans the surrounding tree line with binoculars, searching for the enemy he knows is watching. He finds nothing but shadows and falling snow. The bridge destruction at Borcy is the work of the Armée Secrète, Belgium's secret army of resistance fighters. Since December 16th, these civilians, armed with explosives stolen or airdropped by SOE, have been systematically destroying bridges on every route leading to Houffalize. They work in teams of 3 or 4, moving ahead of German advance guards, setting charges on bridges that Belgian engineers carefully surveyed before the war with exactly this scenario in mind. Their leader, a former civil engineer named Georges Louviot, coordinates from a farmhouse 5 kilometers west of Houffalize, receiving reports from spotters positioned in church towers and forest observation posts. Between December 16th and 18th, his teams destroy 8 bridges on German approach routes, adding an estimated 18 cumulative hours to German advance times. This is not warfare as armies understand it. This is intimate, local knowledge applied with surgical precision. Louviot knows every bridge in his region, knows which are critical and which have alternatives, knows exactly where to place charges for maximum effect. When German military police capture one of his teams on December 19th, they find detailed engineering drawings and a list of 23 additional targets. The Germans execute the 3 resistance members on the spot, but by then the damage is done. Rose's lead Combat Command B, under Brigadier General Houffalize, reaches Hotten at 1400 hours on December 18th. Hotten sits on the Ourthe River, 15 kilometers northwest of Houffalize, and represents the closest American forces have gotten to the critical crossroads. Houffalize's scouts report German reconnaissance elements already in the town's outskirts. The race is converging toward its climax. Within minutes, the first engagement begins, American Shermans versus German armored cars in the narrow streets of a Belgian market town. The fighting is confused and vicious, neither side fully understanding the other's strength or intentions. By nightfall, Hotten has been contested in a small-scale tank battle that leaves 6 American and 4 German vehicles burning in the town square. More critically, both sides now understand they are in a race, and the prize is Houffalize. The fuel crisis that will eventually doom the German offensive is already manifesting at the tactical level. By December 18th, Tebe's Kampfgruppe reports fuel status at 23% of capacity. His Panthers, magnificent fighting machines mounting 75mm guns and frontal armor that can defeat most American tank rounds, consume gasoline at a terrifying rate. Each Panther carries 730 liters of fuel and burns approximately 300 liters per 100 kilometers of road march, more in combat conditions. Tebe calculates he has fuel for approximately 45 kilometers of movement. The distance from his current position to Houffalize is 11 kilometers. The distance from Houffalize to Dinant on the Meuse River, his ultimate objective, is 52 kilometers. The mathematics are stark and unforgiving. Even if he captures Houffalize, he cannot reach the Meuse unless he captures American fuel supplies. The entire offensive has become a motorized gamble, panzers racing forward knowing they lack fuel to retreat, hoping to overrun enemy supply dumps before their own tanks run dry. December 19th, 0 to 800 hours. Both forces are within 5 kilometers of Houffalize, approaching from opposite directions through fog, so thick that visibility drops below 50 meters. Rose has pushed his division beyond reasonable limits, but his lead elements are exhausted, strung out across 30 kilometers of road, and critically short of ammunition after the running fights at Hotten and smaller engagements all along the advance. Tebe's Kampfgruppe has been reinforced during the night by elements of the 2nd Panzer Division, but his fuel situation has deteriorated to crisis level. Both commanders know that Houffalize must be taken immediately, before the enemy consolidates, before the strategic situation changes. Neither knows that in Bastogne, 25 kilometers to the south, the 101st Airborne Division has just arrived and is digging in, about to create the southern anchor that will transform the entire battlefield. The civilian cost of these converging armies becomes horrific. The roads between Bastogne and Houffalize are clogged with Belgian refugees, families who delayed evacuation too long and now find themselves trapped between 2 mechanized armies racing toward collision. On the morning of December 18th, an American P-47 fighter bomber, breaking through the clouds at low altitude, strafes what the pilot identifies as a German convoy on the Houffalize road. He reports destroying 6 vehicles before climbing back into cloud cover. The vehicles were actually Belgian civilian trucks packed with refugees. 47 people die in the attack. German artillery, firing blind through the fog at suspected American positions, lands among refugee columns on multiple occasions. The exact number of civilian casualties will never be known with certainty, but post-war Belgian government estimates suggest approximately 450 civilians died on the roads of the Ardennes between December 16th and 25th, caught in the grinding interface between armies that could not see what they were killing. The strategic significance of these December races becomes clear only in retrospect. Rose's 3rd Armoured Division, driving south, represents the northern jaw of what will become an Allied pincer aimed at crushing the German penetration. Tebbe's Kampfgruppe, driving west, represents the high watermark of German offensive capability, the farthest point that mobile forces can reach before fuel starvation and Allied air power combine to create catastrophe. Houffalize sits at the intersection of these vectors, the town where momentum will meet mathematics. By December 19th evening, both forces have elements on the town's outskirts. Neither can claim control. The Belgian civilians remaining in Houffalize, perhaps 500 souls sheltering in cellars and hoping for deliverance, hear German voices on some streets and American voices on others. They have no way of knowing that their town has become the most contested real estate in Western Europe, that the battle being born in their streets will determine whether Hitler's last gamble succeeds or fails. At 2300 hours on December 19th, von Waldenberg reviews his situation at 116th Panzer Division headquarters, now established in a commandeered Belgian farmhouse 8 kilometers east of Houffalize. His division has advanced 37 kilometers in 3 days of continuous combat, a respectable performance given American resistance and terrible road conditions. But the operational timeline called for capturing Houffalize by 1900 hours today, and the town remains contested. Worse, radio intercepts indicate strong American forces approaching from the north. Worst of all, his fuel stocks are at crisis levels, and the expected resupply columns have not arrived due to partisan attacks and American air interdiction of rear areas. Von Waldenberg is a professional soldier, and professionals understand when plans are unraveling. He issues orders for a final push at dawn. Capture Houffalize or die trying. There is no longer a choice. His division has advanced too far to retreat on available fuel. The only direction is forward, toward the American tanks he knows are waiting in the fog. The parallel desperation of these December races reveals a fundamental truth about mechanized warfare. Speed requires fuel, fuel requires logistics, and logistics require secure rear areas. The German offensive has achieved tactical speed but lost logistical security. Belgian partisans, American air power, and the simple tyranny of distance have severed the supply lines that would allow continued advance. The American response has achieved logistical continuity but sacrificed speed. Rose's division has fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements flowing forward, but the narrow roads and defensive fighting have slowed his advance to a crawl. At Houffalize, these asymmetries will collide. The frozen crossroads that geography has chosen as critical is about to become the stage for a battle where neither side can afford to lose, and neither side possesses the strength to guarantee victory. The race is ending. The siege is about to begin. December 18th, 1944, 23:45 hours. The lead trucks of the 101st Airborne Division screech into Baston's darkened streets, their headlights cutting through falling snow to illuminate a scene of organized chaos. Paratroopers leap from still-moving vehicles, their boots hitting cobblestones, as German artillery shells begin falling on the town's eastern outskirts. Major William de Sobry, commanding a task force of the 10th Armoured Division, already fighting a desperate delaying action, watches the reinforcements arrive with relief bordering on disbelief. For 2 days, his 700 men and 15 tanks have been trying to hold off elements of 3 German divisions, buying time they were told would bring help. Now, help has arrived in the form of 11,840 paratroopers, veterans of Normandy and Market Garden, led by Acting Division Commander Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe. The paratroopers have no winter clothing, limited ammunition, and almost no intelligence about the enemy situation. What they have is a reputation for holding impossible positions and a commander who specializes in laconic defiance. Within 20 minutes of their arrival, German reconnaissance teams report back to their commanders. Bastogne is now defended in strength. The easy capture that was supposed to happen on December 19th is no longer possible. Bastogne is not supposed to be this important. The town is a regional market centre of approximately 4,000 inhabitants, notable mainly for its role as a road hub where 7 highways converge like spokes on a wheel. Military planners on both sides identified it as significant, but not critical, a place to capture or bypass depending on circumstances. But circumstances have a way of transforming geography into destiny. The German 5th Panzer Army's advance has created a salient, a bulge in Allied lines. with Bastogne near its southern shoulder. Von Manteuffel's original plan called for the 26th Volksgrenadier Division to capture the town on December 19th, then continue westward, while the main panzer forces drove toward Houffalize to the north. But American resistance, particularly the suicidal stands made by elements of the 28th Infantry Division, has delayed the German advance just enough for the 101st Airborne to reach Bastogne first. Now, von Manteufel faces a choice. Commit forces to reduce Bastogne, weakening his main effort toward Houffalize, or bypass the town and accept an American garrison sitting on his primary supply route. He chooses a compromise that will prove disastrous. Contain Bastogne with the 26th Volksgrenadier and elements of Panzer-Lehr, while the main forces continue toward Houffalize. The compromise satisfies neither objective and guarantees both will fail. McAuliffe establishes his command post in the Heinz barracks on Bastogne's northern edge and begins the unglamorous work of organizing a defense. The 101st Airborne is an elite formation, but it is designed for short-duration operations supported by rapid relief from conventional forces. The division has minimal artillery, no medium tanks, and supplies calculated for 72 hours of combat. McAuliffe's staff estimates they need 200 tons of supplies per day to sustain defensive operations. They have enough for 3 days, perhaps 4 with strict rationing. The weather forecast offers no hope. Low clouds and snow are predicted to continue indefinitely, making air resupply impossible and ground relief problematic. But McAuliffe, a 56-year-old artilleryman who earned his reputation in Sicily and Normandy, has faced impossible situations before. His orders to his regimental commanders are characteristically direct. Establish a perimeter defense, dig in, hold the road junctions, and kill Germans. When asked how long they need to hold, McAuliffe's answer is equally direct: until relieved or destroyed, whichever comes first. The German encirclement of Bastogne develops rapidly between December 19th and 21st. The 26th Volksgrenadier Division, approximately 15,000 men, approaches from the east. Panzer-Lehr, one of Germany's elite armoured formations commanded by General Fritz Bayerlein, swings around from the south. Elements of the 2nd Panzer Division, diverted from their drive toward Houffalize, close in from the northwest. By December 21st, Bastogne is completely surrounded, cut off from ground contact with American forces. The psychological impact is immediate. Surrounded troops historically have 2 options: break out or surrender. McAuliffe and his paratroopers choose a third option that doctrine doesn't acknowledge. They decide to simply ignore the encirclement and continue fighting as if supply lines remain open. This attitude, part bravado and part calculated psychology, transforms what should be a hopeless situation into a defiant one. December 22nd, 1100 hours, a German delegation approaches American lines under a white flag, carrying a formal surrender demand from General Heinrich von Lüttwitz, commander of the 47th Panzer Corps. The message is couched in the formal language of military courtesy. American forces are surrounded, resistance is futile, continued fighting will result only in unnecessary casualties. Von Lüttwitz offers honourable terms. Officers retain their sidearms, wounded will be treated, prisoners will receive proper care under Geneva Conventions. The message is delivered to McAuliffe's headquarters, where staff officers debate appropriate responses. McAuliffe, roused from sleep to address the situation, reads the German ultimatum and issues a response that will become one of the most famous in American military history. His reply, in its entirety, consists of a single word: nuts. When the bemused German officers ask for clarification, the American translator explains, it means go to hell. The German delegation withdraws, and von Lüttwitz, genuinely shocked by the refusal, orders an all-out assault for December 23rd. The defenders of Bastogne have made their position clear. They will not surrender, they will die in place if necessary, but they will not surrender. The supply crisis in Bastogne becomes acute by December 22nd. Artillery ammunition is rationed to 10 rounds per gun per day, 1/10 the normal expenditure rate. Medical supplies are critically short. Surgeons perform amputations without morphine, using whiskey as anaesthetic. Food rations drop to starvation levels, 1 ration per day, sometimes shared between 2 men. The cold is brutal, temperatures dropping to -15 degrees Celsius at night, and the paratroopers have no winter clothing, having deployed from rest areas in France, expecting a routine assignment. Trench foot and frostbite create hundreds of non-battle casualties. Yet morale remains inexplicably high. Part of this is leadership. McAuliffe's calm confidence permeates the division. Part is unit cohesion. These are veteran formations with strong bonds forged in previous campaigns. But part is simply the human response to being told you're doomed, a perverse determination to prove the prediction wrong. The geometry of Baston's resistance creates immediate problems for German forces advancing toward Houffalize. Panzerlehr Division, diverted to support the Baston encirclement, represents approximately 12,000 men and 60 tanks that von Manteuffel desperately needs for the main effort northward. The 2nd Panzer Division, also partially committed around Bastogne, is similarly weakened. More critically, Bastogne sits astride the main supply route that was supposed to funnel fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements forward to German spearheads approaching Houffalize. With Bastogne holding out, German logistics must detour 40 kilometers around the town, using secondary roads already congested with combat traffic. The time lost in these detours, multiplied across hundreds of supply vehicles, translates to critical shortages at the front. By December 22nd, commanders of the 116th Panzer Division approaching Houffalize report they are receiving less than 30% of requested fuel and ammunition. The supply crisis these shortages create will prove fatal. December 23rd dawns clear and cold, the first break in weather since the offensive began. At 08:15, the drone of aircraft engines brings defenders and attackers alike stumbling from cover to stare upward. C-47 transport planes, flying in tight formation at low altitude, appear over Bastogne, trailing streams of multicolored parachutes. The first major Allied air resupply operation of the siege drops 144 tons of supplies, ammunition, medical materials, food, and most critically, artillery shells. The effect on morale is electric. Paratroopers who spend a week on starvation rations watch crates floating down and begin laughing, some crying, all cheering. More importantly, the clear weather brings fighter bombers. P-47s from the 9th Air Force begin working over German positions around Bastogne, dropping bombs and firing rockets at any concentration of vehicles or troops. The German assault planned for this day dissolves under air attack before it can even form up. The view from Houffalize reveals Bastogne's strategic significance. German officers in the 116th Panzer Division command post can climb the church tower in Houffalize and see, 25 kilometers to the south, the smoke from battle around Bastogne. Radio intercepts confirm what observation suggests. The Americans are still fighting, still holding, still denying the critical road junction. For soldiers trained in Eastern Front warfare, where encirclements typically resulted in rapid surrender or annihilation, the American defense is incomprehensible. The 116th Panzer's War Diary for December 23rd includes a telling notation. Continued resistance at Bastogne makes Houffalize position untenable as supply hub. Forward elements now operating on crisis fuel levels request immediate orders regarding withdrawal or reinforcement. The response from higher headquarters is silence. Hitler has forbidden any discussion of withdrawal, and reinforcements don't exist. The radio traffic between Bastogne and Houffalize tells the story of two battles that will decide one campaign. At Bastogne, MacAuliffe's forces are surrounded but supplied, outnumbered but defiant, creating a fortress that anchors the southern shoulder of the German Bulge. At Houffalize, German forces are advancing but unsupplied, attacking but exhausted, trying to maintain momentum toward objectives that grow more unreachable with each passing hour. The geometry is simple but decisive. As long as Bastogne holds, German supply lines to Houffalize remain compromised. As long as Houffalize remains contested, German forces cannot mass for the overwhelming assault that might crush Bastogne. The two battles feed on each other, creating a mutual stalemate where neither side can achieve the concentration of force needed for decisive victory. By Christmas Eve, December 24th, the strategic situation has crystallized. Bastogne has been surrounded for 4 days and shows no sign of surrendering. American air supremacy, restored by clear weather, has transformed the battlefield. German columns attempting to move in daylight are subjected to devastating attack. The road between Bastogne and Houffalize, which should be flowing with supplies supporting German spearheads at the Meuse River, is instead a killing ground where burned vehicles mark the graves of supply units caught in the open. Von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army, which began the offensive with 90,000 men and high confidence, now finds itself fighting 2 separate battles simultaneously, unable to mass strength at either point. The fortress at Bastogne has become an anchor, and anchors don't need to attack or maneuver. They simply need to exist, holding their position while everything else moves around them. McAuliffe and his paratroopers have achieved something unexpected. By refusing to acknowledge their hopeless situation, they have made it less hopeless with each day they survive. The southern anchor holds, and Houffalize, the town that was supposed to be captured on December 19th, remains contested on December 24th. The mathematics of the offensive are collapsing, one frozen kilometre at a time. December 20th, 1944, 0 to 600 hours. Major Ourthe River stands beside his immobilized Panther tank 8 kilometres east of Houffalize and watches his command die of thirst. Not water, though his men are desperately dehydrated from days of combat. Not blood, though casualties have reduced his Führer-Begleit brigade to half strength. His brigade is dying of gasoline starvation, the most prosaic and unforgiving killer on the modern battlefield. Around him, 47 tanks and assault guns sit silent, their engines cold, their fuel gauges reading empty. Rimer is a Nazi true believer, personally decorated by Hitler for his role in suppressing the July 20th assassination attempt, but ideology cannot make internal combustion engines run without petroleum. He issues the order that has haunted German commanders since Stalingrad cannibalized half the vehicles to create one composite company with fuel. Crews drain tanks into jerry cans, pouring precious litres from immobile hulls into the chosen few that will continue the advance. The men work in silence, understanding the arithmetic of defeat. Each abandoned tank represents 10 million Reichsmarks of investment, 6 months of production, and the irreplaceable expertise of crews that cannot be quickly reconstituted. By 0 to 800 hours, Rimer has exactly 18 operational vehicles. The rest become monuments to the offensive that ran dry before reaching its objective. The fuel calculations that doomed the Ardennes offensive were flawed from conception. German logistics planners, operating under political pressure to support Hitler's vision, calculated that each Panzer division required 300,000 litres of fuel to reach the Meuse River, approximately 150 kilometres from the start line. But German fuel production in late 1944 could allocate only half that amount to each attacking division, 150,000 litres, enough for 75 kilometres of road march under ideal conditions. The plan depended absolutely on capturing American fuel dumps intact, particularly the massive storage facility at Stavelot containing 2.5 million litres. German intelligence had identified these targets, and assault teams had been briefed to prioritise their capture. But the plan contained a fatal assumption that American defenders would not have time to destroy their supplies before German armour arrived. This assumption proved catastrophically wrong. December 17th, 1400 hours. At Stavelot, Captain Robert Repper of the U.S. First Army's Quartermaster Corps watches German tanks approaching from the east. His depot contains 2.5 million litres of gasoline, enough to fuel the entire German 5th Panzer Army for a week. His orders are unambiguous: deny this fuel to the enemy at all costs. Repper has 30 minutes before German advance guards reach his perimeter. His men work with desperate efficiency, connecting explosive charges to fuel bladders, wiring detonators, preparing to destroy supplies worth millions of dollars. At 14:25, Repper gives the order. The resulting explosion is visible from 20 kilometres away, a fireball that rises 300 metres and creates a mushroom cloud eerily reminiscent of atomic weapons that will end another war 9 months hence. German tankers, approaching the depot, watch their salvation transformed into an inferno. The 1st SS Panzer Division's war diary records the moment with unusual emotion. Catastrophic loss. Primary fuel objective destroyed 1 hour before capture. Advanced sustainability now critical. Similar scenes play out across the Ardennes as American supply units, often at great personal risk, destroy fuel stocks rather than allow their capture. The mathematics of fuel consumption reveal why the German offensive was doomed from its first kilometre. A Panther tank, the backbone of German armoured formations, carries 730 litres of fuel in its internal tanks. Under road march conditions, the Panther consumes approximately 3 litres per kilometre, giving it a theoretical range of 240 kilometres. But combat conditions increase consumption dramatically. Stop and start movement in traffic consumes 5 litres per kilometre. Cross-country movement through snow and mud consumes 8 litres per kilometre. Idling while waiting for road clearance consumes 50 litres per hour. The 116th Panzer Division, advancing toward Houffalize, travels approximately 45 kilometers in the first 4 days of the offensive. The road distance suggests each tank should consume 135 liters. The actual consumption, including combat, detours, traffic jams, and idling, averages 420 liters per tank. The division began with fuel for 150 kilometers of movement. By December 20th, most vehicles are running on fumes, and the objective is still 20 kilometers distant. December 21st, 1300 hours. General Siegfried von Waldenberg, commanding the 116th Panzer Division, makes a decision that will haunt German military analysis for decades. He orders his remaining fuel concentrated into 1/3 of his tanks, creating a composite battalion with enough gasoline to potentially reach Houffalize. The other 2/3 of his armour will be abandoned in place, their crews formed into infantry to defend the ground already taken. It is a commander's nightmare, choosing which units live and which die, which soldiers get the chance to continue fighting, and which must watch helplessly as their vehicles are drained and left behind. Waldenberg's operations officer protests that this creates a fatal weakness in the division's combat power. Waldenberg's response is brutally practical. Combat power requires fuel. Without fuel, tanks are bunkers. At least bunkers don't consume gasoline we don't have. The improvised German logistics network attempts heroic measures to sustain the offensive. Horse-drawn wagons, requisitioned from Belgian farms, carry jerry cans of fuel forward at walking pace, 3 kilometers per hour through snow and traffic. Each wagon can carry 12 cans. Each can contains 20 liters, total of 240 liters per wagon load. A single Panther tank consumes that much fuel in approximately 60 kilometers of movement. The impossibility of the situation is arithmetically demonstrable. The offensive requires thousands of liters per hour to sustain momentum, and the supply system can deliver hundreds of liters per day. Staff officers at 5th Panzer Army headquarters calculate that sustaining current operations requires 400 tanker trucks making daily runs from supply depots in Germany to forward areas in Belgium. The actual number available after partisan attacks and Allied air interdiction is fewer than 60 trucks. The gap between requirement and reality grows with each passing day. December 23rd brings clear weather and with it, catastrophe for German supply lines. The P-47 Thunderbolts of the 9th Air Force, grounded for a week by fog and snow, take to the skies with orders to interdict anything moving on roads within 30 kilometers of the front line. The results are devastating. Fighter bombers, each carrying 2,000 pounds of bombs plus rockets, attack German supply columns with impunity. A single P-47 can destroy an entire convoy. The technique is simple and brutally effective. First rocket attacks on the lead vehicle, blocking the road. Second rocket attacks the rear vehicle, trapping the column. Then systematic strafing runs destroy everything in between. Between December 23rd and 26th, American pilots claim 478 German trucks destroyed within the Houffalize operational area. Post-war analysis suggests the actual number may be slightly lower, around 380 vehicles. But the effect is the same. German logistics collapse under sustained air attack. The fuel crisis creates cascading failures across the German offensive. Tanks immobilized for lack of fuel cannot support infantry attacks, making ground assaults prohibitively expensive in casualties. Artillery pieces, which require trucks to move ammunition forward, fall silent as shells can't reach the guns. Reconnaissance units, essential for identifying American positions and movements, cannot patrol without fuel for their vehicles. The offensive, conceived as a lightning thrust combining armor, infantry, artillery, and air power in coordinated assault, degenerates into isolated battles fought by units operating independently because the fuel to concentrate them doesn't exist. The 2nd Panzer Division provides the starkest example of this collapse. On December 24th, the division's lead elements reach Selles, 25 kilometers west of Houffalize, the deepest penetration achieved by German forces in the entire offensive. They arrive with fuel gauges reading 0. The division commander radios Army headquarters, requesting immediate fuel resupply to continue the advance. The response, delayed 6 hours, informs him that no fuel is available. The division is ordered to defend in place. Within 48 hours, American counterattacks will destroy the isolated spearhead. December 24th, 0 to 400 hours. Panzer Division attempts a relief operation toward the 2nd Panzer Division's position at Selles. General Byline personally leads the attack. Knowing his division, represents the last mobile reserve available to rescue the isolated force. His tanks advance 6 kilometers before the first vehicles begin running dry. Byline orders continued advance on remaining fuel. At 8 kilometers, half his tanks have stopped, their engines coughing and dying as fuel lines suck vapor. At 10 kilometers, the attack halts completely. Byline sits in his command vehicle and calculates that he is exactly 14 kilometers from the force he's supposed to rescue. He has no fuel to advance and no fuel to retreat. His relief force has become another isolated unit requiring relief. The chain of immobilization spreads like a contagion, each stalled unit requiring support that drains fuel from other units until the entire offensive is paralyzed. Byline, a veteran of North Africa and Normandy, understands he is witnessing the death of German mechanized warfare. Not death in battle, but death by accountant. The mathematics have rendered courage irrelevant. The final fuel statistics of the Ardennes offensive reveal the operation's fundamental impossibility. German forces consumed approximately 13 million litres of fuel during the month-long campaign. They captured from Allied sources exactly 0 litres, every targeted dump destroyed before capture. Fuel transported from Germany totaled approximately 8 million litres, leaving a shortfall of 5 million litres that was made up by simply running vehicles until empty, then abandoning them. Post-war analysis by American logistics officers calculated that sustaining the offensive to its objective of Antwerp would have required 42 million litres minimum. The actual fuel allocated was 150,000 litres per division, total approximately 6 million litres for all attacking forces. The plan was not ambitious. The plan was arithmetically impossible from conception. But arithmetic is a patient teacher, and its lessons are written in burned-out hulks of panthers and tigers littering the frozen roads of the Ardennes. At Houffalize, the town that was supposed to fall on December 19th, German forces on December 24th possess neither the fuel to advance nor the fuel to retreat. They are trapped by their own logistics, an army immobilized not by enemy action but by empty fuel tanks. The steamroller has stopped. The siege is about to turn into an encirclement. December 21st, 1944, 1400 hours. Lieutenant Colonel William Lovelady, commanding Combat Command B of the 3rd Armoured Division, watches his lead Sherman tank edge around the final bend in the road, approaching Houffalize from the north. The town spreads below him in the valley, smoke rising from a dozen fires, church tower silhouetted against winter sky. For 5 days his command has been fighting southward through snow and German resistance, losing men and vehicles at every river crossing and forest ambush. Now the objective is finally in sight, less than 2 kilometers distant. Lovelady raises his binoculars to study the approaches when the lead tank, commanded by Sergeant James Flowers, disappears in a geyser of flame and smoke. The explosion is so violent that the 32-ton Sherman is lifted bodily off the road, turret separating from hull, ammunition cooking off in secondary blasts that scatter debris across a 100-meter radius. A German Panzerfaust, fired from a building window at 30 meters range, has just announced that Houffalize will not be taken easily. Within minutes, German machine guns open fire from concealed positions throughout the town's northern edge. The first Battle of Houffalize has begun, and it will be unlike anything American forces have experienced in this war. Urban combat is the infantryman's nightmare and the tanker's graveyard. The narrow streets of Houffalize, built in medieval times for pedestrians and carts, create killing zones where American armor advantages in range and mobility become liabilities. A Sherman tank is designed to fight at 800 meters in open country, using its superior optics and stabilized gun to engage German armor before they can return effective fire. In Houffalize's streets, combat ranges collapse to 50 meters or less. At these distances, even obsolete German anti-tank weapons can penetrate Sherman armor, and the buildings provide perfect concealment for ambush teams. Lovelady's tactical problem is geometrically simple and practically impossible. His tanks cannot advance without infantry support, his infantry cannot advance without tank support, and the streets are too narrow for tanks and infantry to advance together. German defenders, primarily from the 116th Panzer Division's Reconnaissance Battalion and Panzer Grenadier Companies, have spent December 20th preparing the town for defence. Every street corner has been ranged by anti-tank guns. Every intersection is covered by interlocking machine gun fire. Buildings have been demolished to create rubble barriers that force attackers into preset kill zones. December 22nd, 0 to 300 hours. The Germans launched their own assault, attempting to secure the town centre before American forces can consolidate their northern foothold. The 116th Panzer Infiltration Team, 40 Panzer Grenadiers led by Hauptmann Friedrich Kessner, moves through cellars and sewers to emerge in Houffalize's central square. Their objective is the Town Hall, a stone building that dominates the intersection of routes N15 and N30. Capturing it would give German forces observation over American positions and provide a strong point for defense. The Americans have the same idea. Combat Command B's Infantry Company, Company B of the 36th Armoured Infantry Regiment, occupies the ground floor of the town hall, having seized it hours earlier. The resulting fight is warfare at its most primitive. Grenades thrown down stairwells, bayonet charges in corridors too narrow for rifles, hand-to-hand struggle in rooms lit only by muzzle flashes. The battle lasts 4 hours. When dawn breaks, 23 Americans and 19 Germans lie dead in the town hall. Neither side controls the building. Both sides claim victory. The civilian population trapped in Houffalize experiences the battle as apocalypse. Approximately 500 Belgian residents remain in the town, sheltering in cellars and basements while armies fight in the streets above them. Marie Durant, the 16-year-old piano student who practiced Christmas carols on December 15th, huddles with her family in their cellar en route de la Promenade. The ceiling shakes with each explosion. Plaster dust falls in streams. Her father has barricaded the cellar door with furniture, hoping it will protect them from soldiers of either army seeking shelter or searching for valuables. Through the tiny cellar window at street level, Marie watches boots pass. American boots, German boots, boots of men running, boots of men crawling wounded, boots of men who will never walk again. She keeps a diary, writing by candlelight in a child's notebook. Her December 22nd entry reads, "The Americans and Germans are fighting for our house. I think our house is winning because it still stands, but I do not know if we will." Her family will survive, evacuated through sewers on December 24th. Their house will not. It will be destroyed by American artillery on December 26th. December 23rd, 11:30 hours. The Americans call in air support, a desperate measure in urban combat, but one commander's deemed necessary to break the deadening stalemate. 16 P-47 Thunderbolts from the 365th Fighter Group receive coordinates for the town centre and are cleared to attack with 500-pound bombs. The pilots, flying through intermittent cloud cover, can see both American and German positions marked with coloured smoke grenades. The problem is that positions have shifted since the smoke was placed. German troops occupy buildings Americans think they hold. Americans have advanced into sectors Germans believe they control. The bombing run, executed with textbook precision, drops 8 tons of high explosive on the town centre. When the dust clears, 17 American soldiers and 14 German soldiers are dead, killed by their own side's ordnance. The town's Catholic church, Church of St. Catherine, standing since 1193, takes a direct hit from a 500-pound bomb. The tower, 1,200 years of architectural achievement, collapses in a cascade of medieval stone and 20th century explosives. Abbe Musty, sheltering 43 civilians in the church crypt, feels the building shake and prays that the vaulted ceiling will hold. It does, barely. When he emerges after the raid, he finds his church transformed into rubble. He stands amid the ruins and weeps. The intensity of combat in Houffalize creates casualty rates comparable to Stalingrad or Hürtgen Forest. Combat Command B of 3rd Armoured Division commits approximately 4,200 men to the battle between December 21st and 26th. Casualties total 1,600, 380 killed, 940 wounded, 280 missing or captured. This represents a 38% casualty rate in 5 days, mathematically unsustainable but achieved nonetheless. The German 116th Panzerkampfgruppe defending the town suffers comparable losses, approximately 1,450 casualties from an engaged force of 3,800 men, a 38% casualty rate. These numbers reveal the fundamental character of the battle. Both sides are destroying each other at equal rates, neither gaining advantage, both bleeding toward exhaustion. Combat psychologists studying post-war interviews with survivors identify Houffalize as one of the battles where normal human psychology broke down most completely. Men report fighting for days without sleep, operating in fugue states where training and muscle memory replaced conscious thought. Multiple soldiers describe watching friends die and feeling nothing, emotion burned out by sustained terror and exhaustion. December 24th, 1800 hours, Christmas Eve. Both sides attempt informal ceasefires, hoping for a few hours of peace in honor of the holy day. In some sectors, the ceasefire holds. American and German soldiers emerge from positions, exchange cigarettes and chocolate, show photographs of families they may never see again. In other sectors, the ceasefire lasts minutes before sniper fire resumes. The hatred between these men who have spent 4 days trying to kill each other cannot be erased by calendar dates. In the ruins of the Church of St. Catherine, Abbé Musty conducts Christmas Eve Mass for the 17 civilians remaining in the church crypt and approximately 30 soldiers, both American and German, who have crawled to the ruins seeking something beyond military necessity. The priest speaks in French, which few understand completely, but the ritual is universal. He blesses the bread and wine amid ruins that smell of cordite and death. Soldiers who hours ago were trying to kill each other kneel side by side and pray. When the service ends, they return to their positions and resume the war. By midnight, artillery exchanges have resumed. The brief peace is over. December 25, 0 to 800 hours. Christmas morning dawns clear and bitterly cold. In Houffalize's main square, a surreal scene unfolds. An American Sherman tank occupies the north end of the square, hull down behind rubble. A German Panther occupies the south end, similarly positioned. The range is approximately 200 meters, nearly point blank for tank combat. Both vehicles have line of sight to each other. For 30 minutes, neither fires. Crews on both sides understand that at this range, whoever shoots first probably destroys the enemy, but whoever shoots first also reveals their exact position and will be engaged by every weapon within range. It is a standoff born of perfect mutual vulnerability. At 0832, the Sherman fires. The 75mm armor-piercing round strikes the Panther's glacis plate and ricochets upward, failing to penetrate but damaging the gun mantlet. The Panther's response is immediate. 188mm round that strikes the Sherman's turret front and penetrates, detonating the ammunition storage. Both tanks brew up simultaneously, both crews bailing out under fire, both vehicles becoming pyres of burning gasoline and cooking ammunition. 8 men die in this exchange. The tactical result is 0. Both tanks are destroyed. Neither side gains advantage. The mathematics of mutual destruction continue their relentless accounting. The ammunition expenditure rates in Houffalize reveal combat intensity that exceeds planning assumptions by orders of magnitude. Combat Command B fires approximately 340,000 small arms rounds between December 21st and 26th, an average of 68,000 rounds per day. Normal planning factors calculate 12,000 rounds per day for a unit this size. The 5-fold increase reflects the nature of urban combat. Reduced visibility requires suppressive fire, close ranges make accuracy less important than volume, and terror creates trigger discipline collapse where soldiers fire at movement, shadows, or nothing at all. Artillery consumption similarly explodes. The 3rd Armoured Division's organic artillery fires 9,200 shells supporting the Houffalize assault, averaging 1,800 shells per day compared to normal rates of 400 per day. The noise alone becomes a weapon. Soldiers exposed to 5 days of continuous explosions in confined urban spaces suffer permanent hearing damage. Post-war medical examinations of Houffalize veterans reveal 73% have significant hearing loss, many completely deaf in one or both ears. By December 26th, both sides have fought themselves to exhaustion. The Americans control approximately 60% of Houffalize, primarily the northern and western districts. The Germans hold the southern and eastern approaches, critically including most routes toward Bastogne. The town centre remains contested, changing hands multiple times per day as small unit actions seize and lose individual buildings. The civilian cost is catastrophic. Post-battle surveys estimate 87% of Houffalize's structures are destroyed or severely damaged. Of the 500 civilians who remained in town when the battle began, 180 are confirmed dead, killed by artillery, small arms, or collapsing buildings. The survivors, approximately 320 people, are evacuated through sewers and drainage tunnels on December 24th and 25th, guided by Belgian resistance members who know every underground passage in their town. Many emerge into American lines traumatized beyond speech, eyes vacant, minds shattered by experiences that will haunt them for decades. The tactical lessons of Houffalize's first battle are written in blood and ruins. Armor in urban terrain requires infantry support at ratios far exceeding doctrinal recommendations. Artillery in street fighting creates as many problems as it solves, destroying cover that friendly forces need and creating rubble that impedes movement. Air support in contested urban areas is nearly impossible to coordinate safely. Command and control breaks down at scales below company level, as platoons and squads become isolated in building-to-building combat that bears no relationship to operational plans. But the deepest lesson, the one that will influence American urban warfare doctrine for generations, is psychological. Cities cannot be captured without destroying them, and destroying them kills the civilians they're supposedly being liberated to save. Houffalize is being saved to death, its stones pulverized to dust, its people scattered or slain, its 800-year history erased in 5 days of combat that achieves nothing but destruction. As December 26 ends, the question both sides face is simple and terrible. Is this town worth what it's costing? The answer, delivered by commanders, far from the rubble and the screaming, is yes. The battle will continue. December 12, 1944. In a nondescript office building in Berlin, Luftwaffe meteorologist Dr. Werner Schwertfeger studies weather charts with the intensity of a man whose predictions will decide the fate of nations. Schwertfeger is 41 years old, a PhD in atmospheric physics from the University of Hamburg, and one of Germany's most respected forecasters. He has been summoned to brief Adolf Hitler personally on weather conditions for the planned Ardennes offensive. The Führer is obsessed with meteorology, understanding intuitively what his generals sometimes miss, that modern mechanized warfare is as vulnerable to weather as ancient armies were to terrain. Schwertfeger's forecast will determine the timing of Operation Wacht am Rhein, and he knows Hitler will accept no equivocation. The charts before him show a powerful low-pressure system developing over the North Atlantic, forecast to reach Central Europe by December 15th. This system will bring exactly what German forces need: heavy cloud cover, fog, and snow that will ground Allied air power for at least 10 days. Schwertfeger completes his analysis and delivers his prediction. Launch the offensive on December 16th, and weather will provide concealment through December 24th or later. Hitler, delighted, orders the attack scheduled accordingly. The meteorologist's forecast will prove 90% accurate. The remaining 10% will prove catastrophic. The weather over the Ardennes on December 16th is German perfection. Cloud ceiling drops to 280 meters, visibility deteriorates to 400 meters in most sectors, and intermittent snow reduces it further to less than 100 meters. These conditions completely ground tactical air support. The 9th Air Force, with 2,800 aircraft staged at bases in France and Belgium, cannot fly a single sortie. The RAF's 2nd Tactical Air Force, another 1,600 aircraft in England, is similarly paralysed. For the Germans, this represents the most favourable air situation since the invasion of Poland. Their armour can move in daylight without fear of attack. Their supply columns can traverse roads without harassment. Their troop concentrations can assemble without interdiction. The weather advantage buys the offensive its initial surprise and allows penetrations that would have been impossible under clear skies. But weather is a faithless ally. The same fog that conceals German movements also slows them, reduces visibility that armour commanders need for navigation, and creates traffic jams where entire divisions bog down on roads they cannot see. General Hoyt Vandenberg, commanding the 9th Air Force, spends December 16th through 22nd in a state of frustrated rage. His fighters and bombers sit on airfields, while his instruments report German breakthroughs that should be perfect targets for air interdiction. Weather reconnaissance flights, flown at great risk through the overcast, return with reports that make the situation worse. Below the clouds, German armour is advancing unimpeded. Vandenberg understands the mathematics of air power. One P-47 Thunderbolt can destroy more enemy vehicles in a single sortie than an entire infantry battalion can engage in a day of ground combat. His 2,800 grounded aircraft represent combat power equivalent to perhaps 50 divisions of ground troops, all rendered useless by water vapour and atmospheric pressure. He orders his meteorologists to brief him every 4 hours, searching for any break in the weather that might allow even limited operations. The forecasts remain uniformly pessimistic. Low-pressure system locked in place, clouds and fog expected to continue indefinitely. December 22nd, 1600 hours, A weather reconnaissance B-17 from the 8th Air Force, flying at 6,000 meters over the English Channel, radios a report that electrifies Allied command. A high-pressure system is developing over Scandinavia, forecast to reach Central Europe by December 23rd. This anticyclonic flow will bring clear, cold conditions ideal for flight operations. Vandenberg immediately orders all units to prepare for maximum effort. Crew chiefs work through the night servicing aircraft, armorers load bombs and rockets, ground crews position fuel trucks and ammunition trailers. By 0 to 700 hours on December 23rd, the 9th Air Force is ready to launch the largest single-day air operation of the European War. They're simply waiting for the weather to cooperate. At 0 to 800 hours, the first pilots report clear skies above their bases. The weather war is about to shift violently in favour of the Allies. December 23rd, 08:15 hours. The first clear sunrise in 7 days breaks over the Ardennes, revealing a scene that makes Allied pilots almost unable to believe their instruments. Below them, stretched across the frozen landscape in plain view, are hundreds of German vehicles. Tanks, trucks, half-tracks, artillery pieces, all exposed on white snow that provides perfect contrast for aerial observation. For a week, German commanders have grown accustomed to moving in daylight without air attack. Columns are dispersed casually, camouflage discipline has slipped, and vehicles concentrate at Crossroads without regard for aerial observation. Now that complacency becomes fatal. The first P-47 flight, 4 aircraft from the 365th Fighter Group, spots a German convoy on the road between Houffalize and Bastogne. The formation leader, Captain Robert Johnson, reports, advise higher, target-rich environment. Request additional strikes. Within the hour, more than 200 Allied aircraft are working the Houffalize sector, attacking everything that moves. The effectiveness of air power against concentrated armor is devastating when conditions permit its employment. A P-47 Thunderbolt typically carries 2,000 pounds of ordnance, 2 500-pound bombs, 8 5-inch rockets, and 1,200 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. The standard attack profile begins at 2,000 meters, diving to release bombs at 800 meters, then climbing to 1,000 meters for rocket runs, finally making strafing passes at 200 meters altitude. Each attack lasts approximately 90 seconds and, on average, destroys or damages 47% of targeted vehicles. Post-war analysis comparing pilot claims against German loss reports suggests actual kill rates are lower, approximately 28% of claimed targets, but even this reduced figure represents extraordinary effectiveness. Between December 23rd and 26th, Allied aircraft fly more than 15,000 sorties over the Ardennes, claiming 1,200 German vehicles destroyed. German records, incomplete due to chaos and loss of documentation, confirm at least 760 vehicle losses to air attack in this period. The true number likely falls between these figures. The psychological effect of sustained air attack on German ground forces exceeds the physical damage. Soldiers who have fought in relative security for a week suddenly find themselves hunted from above, attacked by enemies they cannot see until seconds before bombs fall. Daylight movement becomes suicidal. Units that advanced boldly on December 16th now hide in forests during daylight, emerging only at night to creep forward under cover of darkness. This forces German operations into a nocturnal schedule that reduces advance rates by approximately 70%. Night movement through snow-covered forests, without adequate maps and with minimal visibility, creates navigation disasters. Units become lost, stumble into American positions unexpectedly, or simply wander in circles until daylight forces them back into hiding. The 116th Panzer Division's war diary for December 24th includes a desperate notation: daylight advance impossible under current air superiority. Night movement inadequate to maintain operational timetable. Request immediate instructions. The response from higher headquarters is silence. There are no instructions that can solve weather. December 24 through 26 becomes known to German survivors as the Great Hunt. Allied air forces, freed from weather constraints and coordinated by effective ground control, achieve air supremacy so complete that it approaches the absolute. German Luftwaffe attempts to contest this supremacy, launching Operation Bodenplatte on January 1st, 1945, a massive strike against Allied airfields intended to destroy grounded aircraft. The operation is tactically successful, destroying 150 Allied aircraft on the ground, but strategically catastrophic for Germany. 300 Luftwaffe aircraft are lost in the operation, including irreplaceable experienced pilots. After Bodenplatte, effective German air resistance in the west collapses. The skies above Houffalize belong entirely to the Allies. Ground attack aircraft operating cab rank formations, circling above the battlefield and responding to radio calls from ground controllers within minutes. Forward air controllers, embedded with frontline units, direct strikes against targets as small as individual tanks or machine gun positions. This level of air-ground coordination represents a revolutionary development in combined arms warfare. The weather's role extends beyond enabling or preventing air operations. The extreme cold, temperatures dropping to minus 18 degrees Celsius at night, creates its own casualties. American forces, most lacking adequate winter clothing, suffer approximately 2,800 frostbite casualties in the Houffalize sector between December 16th and January 15th. German forces, equally unprepared for extended winter operations, report similar numbers. Frostbite becomes a manpower drain comparable to combat casualties, removing soldiers from frontline service for weeks or permanently. Weapons malfunction in the cold, firing pins break, lubricants freeze, ammunition performance degrades. Vehicles require extended warming periods before engines will start consuming precious fuel for no movement. The human body's caloric requirements increase by approximately 40% in extreme cold, but rations remain at standard levels, creating slow starvation that degrades combat effectiveness. Soldiers burn furniture, fence posts, and occasionally wooden ammunition crates for warmth, despite orders prohibiting fires that might reveal positions to enemy artillery. The final weather factor, often overlooked in histories focused on combat operations, is the psychological impact of continuous cold and darkness. December in the Ardennes provides approximately 8 hours of daylight and 16 hours of darkness. Soldiers spend 2/3 of their lives in darkness, either fighting at night or attempting to sleep during day, neither effectively. The shortened daylight hours create metabolic depression, reducing alertness and degrading decision-making. Combined with sleep deprivation from combat operations, cold weather psychological effects create what medical officers describe as Arctic stupor. Soldiers who follow orders mechanically but cannot initiate action, who watch threats develop without responding, who simply sit and wait for something to happen. Post-war psychiatric analysis of Houffalize veterans reveals extraordinarily high rates of depression and suicide, rates that correlate more strongly with duration of winter combat exposure than with intensity of combat experience. By December 26th, the weather war has decisively shifted. Clear, cold conditions persist, giving Allied air forces the operational freedom they've lacked since the offensive began. The German advantage purchased by accurate weather forecasting has evaporated, replaced by Allied advantages in air power that German forces cannot counter. The mathematical impact is brutal. Each day of clear weather removes approximately 40 German vehicles from the battlefield through air attack alone, not counting ground combat losses. This attrition rate is unsustainable. Von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army, which began the offensive with approximately 1,800 tanks and assault guns, is reduced to fewer than 600 operational vehicles by December 26th. Approximately 400 of those 1,200 losses are attributable to air attack enabled by weather clearing. The weather gamble that seemed so promising on December 16th has become another dimension of disaster. Hitler's meteorologists provided accurate forecasts, but accuracy and success are not synonymous. The weather gave Germany 1 week of concealment. The Allies' weather gave them air supremacy that will last until war's end. The atmospheric physics that seemed to favour the offensive has reversed, and reversed decisively. Above Houffalize, the sky is clear and belongs entirely to the enemy. December 26th, 1944, 1000 hours. In a commandeered schoolhouse in Hasselt, Belgium, General Dwight Eisenhower stands before a situation map that shows the German Bulge in stark clarity. To his left stands Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, temporarily commanding all Allied forces north of the Bulge. To his right stands General Omar Bradley, commanding forces to the south. The three men are studying the same geographic reality. German forces have driven a salient approximately 80 kilometers wide and 60 kilometers deep into Allied lines, creating a bulge with Houffalize near its center. Eisenhower's decision in this moment will determine how the Allies respond to this crisis. He can attack the western tip of the bulge, attempting to cut off German spearheads that have penetrated deepest, but leaving the majority of enemy forces free to withdraw. Or he can attack the shoulders, north and south, attempting to pinch off the entire salient at its base, trapping everything inside. The first option is safer, more conventional, and less risky. The second option is audacious, potentially war-winning, and extraordinarily dangerous if it fails. Eisenhower places his finger on Houffalize, the town that sits equidistant from both shoulders. We pinch here. He says, Montgomery drives south, Patton drives north. We meet at Houffalize and crush everything inside. The trap is set. The operational concept requires perfect coordination between forces that have spent weeks fighting separately. Montgomery's 21st Army Group, approaching from the north, includes the 82nd Airborne Division, 3rd Armoured Division, and British 20X Corps elements, approximately 70,000 men. Patton's 3rd Army, approaching from the south, includes the 4th Armoured Division, 11th Armoured Division, and 87th Infantry Division, approximately 65,000 men. These forces must advance through winter conditions, against determined German resistance, across terrain that favours defence, and link up at a town both sides are already fighting to control. The margin for error is minimal. If German forces detect the pincer movement early, they can withdraw before the trap closes. If either Allied force is delayed significantly, the other will find itself overextended and vulnerable to counterattack. The operation requires speed, surprise, and success at a dozen individual battles, each of which could fail and compromise the entire plan. Inside what is rapidly becoming the Houffalize pocket, German commanders begin to understand their situation with growing alarm. Field Marshal Walther Model, commanding Army Group B from his headquarters near Münstereifel, reviews intelligence reports that paint a disturbing picture. American forces are not retreating to defensive positions, as doctrine suggests they should after suffering a major breakthrough. Instead, they're counterattacking on both flanks of the salient, pushing toward each other in a pattern that suggests encirclement. Model is a veteran of the Eastern Front, where he earned the nickname Hitler's Fireman for his ability to rescue desperate situations. He recognizes the Allied intention immediately and radios a request, permission to withdraw forces from the western tip of the salient before they're trapped. Hitler's response, delivered December 27th, is unequivocal: no withdrawal. Every metre of ground will be held. The forces around Houffalize will fight in place. Model understands this order is a death sentence for approximately 23,000 German soldiers. But he is a professional soldier, and professionals follow orders, even suicidal ones. The forces trapped in the forming pocket represent some of Germany's best remaining formations: the 116th Panzer Division, the 2nd Panzer Division's remnants, and elements of Panzer Lehr, total approximately 23,000 men. Their armoured strength, depleted by combat and mechanical breakdown, includes 78 operational tanks and assault guns, down from the 250 they began the offensive with. These are veteran units, many soldiers, survivors of years of combat on the Eastern Front, men who understand encirclement warfare intimately and know its usual outcome, but they're also exhausted, undersupplied, and increasingly demoralized. The initial euphoria of the offensive's first days has evaporated, replaced by grim awareness that the advance has stalled and supplies aren't coming. By December 27th, soldiers in the pocket are receiving 1/4 normal rations. Artillery units are limited to 3 shells per gun per day. Fuel status is critical across all formations. The supply situation in the pocket deteriorates with mathematical inevitability. A German Panzer Division in defensive operations requires approximately 120 tons of supplies daily: fuel, ammunition, food, medical supplies, spare parts. The Houffalize pocket contains portions of 3 divisions, requiring 360 tons daily minimum. Supply by ground is impossible. American forces have cut all road connections. The only supply option is air delivery, and Luftwaffe transport capacity in late December 1944 is catastrophically inadequate. Germany's fleet of Junkers Ju-52 transports, the workhorses of aerial resupply, has been depleted to approximately 300 operational aircraft on all fronts. Of these, perhaps 120 can be allocated to the Houffalize operation. Each Ju-52 carries approximately 2 tons of cargo. This means the maximum theoretical delivery capacity, if every aircraft flies every day and all reach the target successfully, is 240 tons daily. The minimum requirement is 360 tons. The mathematics are impossible before accounting for weather, mechanical failures, or Allied fighters. December 28th, 1600 hours. The Luftwaffe attempts its first major supply drop to forces in the Houffalize pocket. 120 Ju-52 transports, escorted by 40 Me-109 fighters, approach the designated drop zone near Houffalize at an altitude of 300 meters. Allied radar detects the formation 50 kilometers out. P-47 fighters from the 56th Fighter Group intercept the transports while they're still 15 kilometers from the drop zone. The resulting aerial battle is one-sided and brutal. The Ju-52s, lumbering and slow, are perfect targets. Within 15 minutes, 22 transports are shot down. The survivors scatter, many jettisoning their cargo early to escape. Of the 120 aircraft that began the mission, only 18 reached the intended drop zone and successfully deliver supplies. Total tonnage delivered 36 tons, 1/10 of the day's minimum requirement. 22 aircraft, and their crews are lost. The cost-benefit ratio is catastrophically unfavourable, but the Luftwaffe has no choice. They will try again tomorrow. The dimensions of the pocket become clearly defined by December 30th. The encircled area measures approximately 18 kilometers north to south and 12 kilometers east to west, a total area of 216 square kilometers. Within this perimeter, 23,000 German soldiers occupy hasty defensive positions, knowing relief is unlikely and breakout nearly impossible. The pocket's geography favors defense. The Ourthe River Valley provides natural obstacles, the surrounding forests offer concealment, and the winter weather limits Allied mobility. But geography cannot solve the fundamental problems of supply and attrition. Each day, the garrison consumes supplies it cannot replace and suffers casualties it cannot evacuate. The arithmetic of encirclement is patient and merciless. Medical conditions in the pocket become critical by early January. The trapped force includes approximately 4,200 wounded soldiers requiring care. German military medical doctrine calls for 1 doctor per 1,000 soldiers, suggesting the pocket should have 23 physicians. The actual number, after combat losses and command decisions to evacuate medical personnel before the pocket closed, is 7 doctors. These 7 men must care for 4,200 wounded with supplies for perhaps 400. Morphine runs out on December 31st. Sulfur drugs are exhausted by January 3rd. Amputations are performed without anesthesia, using saws and knives, sterilized in boiled snow water. The survival rate for seriously wounded soldiers drops from the pre-encirclement rate of 84% to 31% by January 8th. Soldiers with wounds that would be readily treatable in normal conditions die from infection, blood loss, or shock. The medical crisis creates psychological trauma that exceeds the combat stress. Soldiers who might accept death in battle find it harder to accept death by medical neglect. The ration situation provides another dimension of suffering. Normal German military rations provide approximately 3,000 calories daily, adequate for soldiers performing heavy physical labor in cold weather. By December 30th, the Houffalize pocket receives enough food for approximately 700 calories per soldier daily, roughly 1/4 of requirement. This is starvation level, inadequate to maintain body weight or physical capability. Soldiers begin supplementing official rations by slaughtering horses from the few cavalry units in the pocket. Horse meat, if cooked thoroughly, provides protein and calories, but the pocket lacks fuel for proper cooking. Many soldiers develop gastrointestinal illnesses from undercooked meat. By January 6th, official rations have dropped to approximately 400 calories per soldier daily. Men are literally starving, losing weight at rates approaching 1 kilogram per day. Physical capability degrades proportionally. Soldiers cannot march long distances, cannot dig effective fortifications, cannot mount vigorous attacks or counterattacks. January 5th, 1945, 0 to 800 hours. A panzer crew from the 2nd Panzer Division makes the decision that thousands of their comrades will soon follow. Their Tiger tank has been immobilized for 6 days, out of fuel, serving as a static pillbox in the pocket's defensive perimeter. They have received no rations for 48 hours. American probing attacks are growing stronger daily. The crew chief, Oberfeldwebel Klaus Richter, gathers his 4 crewmen and proposes escape. Abandon the tank, travel light, attempt to infiltrate through American lines under cover of darkness. The risks are enormous. Escaping prisoners are routinely shot if caught. The journey is 40 kilometers through enemy-held territory in -18-degree weather. The odds of success are perhaps 1 in 4. The odds of survival, if they stay in the pocket, are approaching 0. The crew takes a vote. It's unanimous. They will attempt escape. That night, they leave their tank, their unit, and their army, walking east through snow and darkness. 38 hours later, 4 of them reach German lines. The 5th, frozen and exhausted, surrenders to an American patrol rather than continue. He will survive the war. His 4 comrades who successfully escaped will all be killed in the Rhine, crossing battles 6 weeks later. Survival is relative, and fate is capricious. By January 8th, the Houffalize pocket has become a humanitarian catastrophe wrapped in a military disaster. Approximately 19,000 German soldiers remain in the encirclement, down from 23,000 on December 27th. The missing 4,000 include 1,200 killed in combat, 800 died from wounds or cold, 600 captured, and approximately 1,400 escaped through gaps in American lines or simply walked away from units too disorganized to stop them. The pocket continues to receive supplies by air, averaging 8 tons per day against requirements of 120 tons daily. This is not a military operation, it is a siege, and sieges have predictable outcomes. The last radio transmission received from pocket forces, logged at 1900 hours on January 8th, reads, "Munition erschöpft, wir halten aus. Ammunition exhausted, we hold out." It is a statement of defiance that cannot alter mathematical reality. The pocket is dying, 1 frozen soldier at a time, waiting for relief that will never come, or orders to break out that Hitler will never authorize. Above Houffalize, Allied aircraft circle like vultures, attacking anything that moves. The trap has closed. The crushing will begin soon. December 29th, 1944, 0 to 400 hours. Obergefreiter Klaus Meyer huddles in a frozen shell crater 3 kilometers east of Houffalize, trying to write a letter by the light of a guttering candle stub. His hands shake from cold and exhaustion as he forms words that he knows will probably never reach his wife in Hamburg. "Liebling," he writes, "we have been without food for 2 days now. Yesterday we killed one of the horses from the artillery battery and roasted the meat over a small fire. It tasted like leather, but it was something. The Americans are everywhere around us. We hear their tanks at night, engines running, while ours sit silent for lack of fuel. The officers say reinforcements are coming, but the men no longer believe this. I no longer believe this." Meyer is 24 years old, a veteran of the 116th Panzer Division who has fought from Normandy through the Ardennes. He has survived battles that killed thousands, but he is beginning to understand that survival has limits, that courage and skill cannot overcome mathematics. He folds the letter carefully and places it in his tunic pocket. If he dies, perhaps someone will find it and mail it. If he lives, perhaps he will mail it himself. Either way, writing the words provides comfort in the darkness. Around him, 19,000 German soldiers wait for dawn, for relief, for orders, for anything that might make sense of what they're enduring. The physical conditions inside the Houffalize pocket degrade with a velocity that shocks even veteran soldiers accustomed to hardship. The German military logistics system, efficient and thorough under normal circumstances, has completely collapsed under the combined pressures of encirclement, weather, and Allied air superiority. Ration distribution, which began at 75% of normal on December 27th, drops to 40% by December 30th, 15% by January 3rd, and approaches starvation level by January 6th. At 800 calories per day, the human body begins consuming its own muscle tissue for energy. Soldiers become visibly thinner, faces gaunt, movements slow and deliberate to conserve energy. The cold compounds the caloric deficit. Human metabolism must burn approximately 40% more energy to maintain core temperature in minus 15-degree weather. Men are literally freezing and starving simultaneously, their bodies cannibalizing themselves while trying to stay warm. The breakdown of military discipline follows the breakdown of supply with predictable inevitability. On December 31st, soldiers from the 2nd Panzer Division break into a Belgian farmhouse 6 kilometers from Houffalize, searching for food. They find a cellar containing preserved vegetables, canned meat, and most critically, several bottles of schnapps. The soldiers devour the food ravenously, then drink the alcohol. Within hours, drunk and warm for the first time in weeks, they begin arguing about whose fault the encirclement is, whose responsibility the failed offensive represents. The argument escalates to violence. When military police arrive to restore order, They find 2 soldiers dead from knife wounds, killed not by the enemy but by their own comrades in a drunken brawl over nothing. The incident is recorded in divisional records with bureaucratic precision. 2 casualties, non-combat, alcohol-related. Discipline deteriorating. The following day, officers order the confiscation of all alcoholic beverages and sidearms from enlisted personnel. The implicit message is clear. We trust you to fight the Americans, but not to manage yourselves. January 3rd, 1945, 1400 hours. In the crypt beneath Houffalize's ruined church, Dr. Hans Weber performs his 23rd amputation in 4 days. Weber is a 42-year-old surgeon from Munich, one of 7 physicians trapped in the pocket, responsible for caring for approximately 4,200 wounded soldiers, with medical supplies adequate for perhaps 400. The patient on his improvised operating table is a 19-year-old Panzer Grenadier with a compound fracture of the left leg, broken when a collapsing building struck him during an American artillery barrage. Under normal circumstances, this injury would be splintered, the soldier evacuated to a field hospital, antibiotics administered to prevent infection, and the leg would likely heal within 3 months. But circumstances are not normal. Weber has no antibiotics, no evacuation capability, and no splinting materials. The leg is already showing signs of infection, red streaks spreading from the wound site, fever developing, the smell of gangrene beginning. Weber's choice is simple and terrible. Amputate the leg now, without anesthesia, or watch the soldier die from sepsis within a week. The surgery takes 17 minutes and requires 3 soldiers to hold the patient down while he screams. The soldier survives, barely. Weber washes his instruments in boiled snow water and prepares for the next patient. There are always more patients. The ammunition shortage creates tactical paralysis that transforms the pocket's defense from active resistance to passive endurance. German military doctrine calls for aggressive defense, counterattacks to disrupt enemy preparations, artillery barrages to interdict assembly areas, patrol actions to maintain initiative and gather intelligence. All of this requires ammunition, and ammunition is precisely what the pocket lacks. By January 5th, artillery units are restricted to 3 shells per gun per day, making coordinated fire support impossible. Infantry companies receive approximately 50 rifle rounds per soldier, enough for perhaps 30 minutes of sustained combat. Machine gun companies are better supplied, with approximately 2,000 rounds per weapon, but orders prohibit firing except at confirmed targets. Anti-tank weapons are virtually exhausted. Panzerfaust teams have an average of 2 rockets each, forcing them to wait until enemy tanks are within 50 meters before engaging. This creates psychological horror, where soldiers must watch American armor approach, knowing they cannot fire until the enemy is close enough to kill them with a single main gun round. The cold claims more victims than combat as January progresses. Frostbite, the gradual freezing of extremities that begins with numbness and ends with tissue death, becomes epidemic. By January 10th, the pocket's medical officers have logged approximately 2,800 frostbite cases, many severe enough to require amputation or long-term hospitalization. The progression is clinically predictable. First-degree frostbite causes redness and numbness, usually reversible. Second-degree creates blisters and tissue damage, often permanent. Third-degree frostbite kills tissue completely, requiring amputation to prevent gangrene. Soldiers trapped in static defensive positions, unable to move to generate warmth, unable to build fires that might reveal their positions to American artillery observers, slowly freeze in place. Sentries are found dead at their posts, frozen solid in standing positions, rifles still in their hands. Squad leaders check on positions and find entire crews dead from hypothermia, huddled together for warmth that never came. The desertion and breakout attempts accelerate through early January. Official German records, fragmentary and often destroyed, suggest approximately 3,400 soldiers attempted individual escape from the Houffalize pocket between December 28th and January 15th. Post-war analysis, comparing American prisoner interrogations with German unit strength reports, suggests approximately 1,800 succeeded in reaching German lines. The mathematics are brutal. About 53% of escape attempts resulted in death or capture. But for soldiers facing certain death or capture inside the pocket, 53% represents acceptable odds. The escapes follow predictable patterns. Soldiers travel individually or in pairs, moving only at night, avoiding roads and settlements, living off stolen food or nothing at all. Some make the 40-kilometer journey in 2 nights of forced march. Others take a week, hiding during daylight, scavenging what they can. The successful escapees often arrive at German lines in shocking condition, frostbitten, starving, sometimes delirious from exposure, but they are alive, and life is the only victory left to claim. January 5th, 1945, diary entries recovered post-war from 5 soldiers trapped in the Houffalize pocket provide insight into the psychological deterioration of encircled forces. Unteroffizier Martin Schulz, 26th Volksgrenadier Division. Today I considered shooting myself. Not from cowardice, but from logic. We will die here. If not today, then tomorrow or next week. Why wait for the inevitable? But I cannot. My mother would never forgive me. So I will wait for the Americans to do what I cannot. Gefreiter Hans Richter, 2nd Panzer Division. Saw 3 men from 4th Company hanged today. Tried to desert last night. Were caught by military police. The whole battalion forced to watch the execution. Officers say it's to maintain discipline, but we're already dead men. What does discipline matter to corpses? Obergefreiter Paul Fischer, 116th Panzer. The new orders say, fight to the last man. Last bullet, easy to give such orders from warm headquarters in Germany. Here, we have no bullets left to fight to. What then? Fight with rocks? Fight with curses? These are not the voices of defeated men. They are voices of men who understand defeat intellectually, but cannot accept it emotionally. Trapped in the cognitive dissonance between training that demands resistance and reality that guarantees annihilation. The psychological phenomenon of learned helplessness emerges among pocket forces with characteristics that will interest post-war psychiatrists for decades. Soldiers who initially fought aggressively become passive, unable to initiate action even when tactically necessary. Squad leaders report troops who follow orders mechanically but show no initiative, no creativity, no survival instinct beyond bare compliance. When American probing attacks approach positions, some soldiers fight with desperate intensity while others simply watch, weapons unfired, waiting to be killed or captured with apparent indifference. Medical officers begin confiscating sidearms from soldiers showing suicidal ideation, but the confiscation list grows so long that officers realize they're disarming half their force. The decision's made to return the weapons and accept the risk. Better suicide than total inability to resist American attacks. 3 confirmed suicides occur on January 7th alone, though officers suspect the actual number is higher, some disguised as combat casualties to spare families the shame. January 8th, 1945, 1900 hours. The last organised radio transmission from the Houffalize pocket is logged at 15th Army headquarters. The message, transmitted by an unknown operator whose voice sounds young and exhausted, consists of 14 words. Munition erschöpft. Keine Verflügen seit wir tagen. Verwundete sterben. Wir halten uns. Ammunition exhausted, no food for 4 days. Wounded, dying, we hold out. The transmission ends abruptly, possibly interrupted by American jamming, possibly by equipment failure, possibly because the operator had nothing more to say. Follow-up attempts to contact pocket forces receive no response. Higher headquarters records the pocket as presumed destroyed or surrendered. This assessment is premature. Approximately 16,000 German soldiers remain alive in the pocket, though alive is increasingly a technical distinction. They breathe, they occupy space, they consume the last calories their bodies can extract from muscle tissue, but they are no longer a military force in any meaningful sense. They are survivors waiting for someone to decide their fate. The human cost of the Houffalize pocket extends beyond the soldiers trapped inside. Families in Germany receive standardized letters. Your son, husband, father is missing in action in the Ardennes. Further information will be provided when available. But further information is not available because chaos has consumed record-keeping. Units have disintegrated into scattered groups, chain of command has fractured. Many soldiers who died in the pocket will be listed as missing for the war's duration, their families haunted by uncertainty worse than confirmed death. The wounded, who cannot be evacuated, face particularly cruel fates. Those requiring surgery that cannot be performed in field conditions slowly die from treatable injuries. Those requiring medication that doesn't exist suffer agonies that morphine could ease. Those requiring evacuation to hospitals lie in frozen cellars and basements. some for weeks, slowly weakening until cold or infection claims them. Post-war testimony from surviving medical personnel describes conditions comparable to concentration camps. Emaciated soldiers lying in their own waste, too weak to move, waiting for death with vacant eyes. By January 10th, the Houffalize pocket has transformed from military formation to humanitarian catastrophe. The encircled forces no longer represent a threat to Allied operations. They cannot attack, cannot maneuver, can barely defend the ground they occupy. But Hitler's orders prohibit surrender, and most soldiers, despite their desperation, cannot bring themselves to disobey. They are trapped not only by American forces but by their own training, their own identity as German soldiers, their own inability to accept that the war for them has ended even though the war continues. Inside the shrinking perimeter, men wait in frozen holes, conserving the last bullets, rationing the last scraps of food, telling themselves that relief will come tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. But relief will not come. The pocket will be crushed by converging American pincers, its defenders killed or captured, its existence erased except in casualty reports and the nightmares of survivors. The cauldron is boiling dry, its contents reduced to ash and memory. The suffering continues because no one with authority to end it cares enough to try. January 2nd, 1945, 0 to 900 hours. Abbé Musty leads 47 Belgian civilians through the sewer system beneath Houffalize, their final escape from the town that has become their tomb. The priest is 63 years old, a man who has served this parish for 32 years, baptizing the children, marrying the couples, burying the dead. Now he guides his flock through tunnels originally built in the 17th century for drainage, narrow passages filled with freezing water that reaches waist deep in some sections. The group includes 11 children, the youngest only 4 years old, carried on her father's shoulders through water that would drown her in seconds. They move in darkness, following Abbé Musty's instructions whispered from memory, the priest having explored these tunnels in his youth and never forgetting their layout. Behind them, the town they're abandoning burns. Artillery shells fall at random intervals, the crump of explosions echoing through the sewer system, reminding them why escape is necessary. After 2 hours of crawling, wading, and climbing, they emerge into daylight 3 kilometers west of Houffalize, into American lines, into survival. Abbé Musty turns to look back at his town one final time. From this distance, through smoke and falling snow, Houffalize is barely visible, just a smudge of darkness against white landscape. He will never see it whole again. The destruction of Houffalize represents one of the most complete annihilations of any town in Western Europe during World War II. Pre-war aerial photographs, compared with January 1945 images, reveal the magnitude. 542 buildings stood in the town centre on December 15th, 1944. By January 18th, 1945, 478 of those buildings are completely destroyed, reduced to rubble and foundation stones. 64 buildings are severely damaged, roofs collapsed, walls breached, interiors gutted by fire. 0 buildings remain undamaged. Not a single structure in Houffalize's historic centre survives the battle intact. The comparison is often made to Cassino in Italy, another town destroyed by sustained combat, but Houffalize's destruction is proportionally worse. Cassino retained recognisable ruins, architectural fragments that indicated what had stood there. Houffalize becomes a field of rubble where identifying individual building sites requires reference to pre-war maps. The tonnage of explosives that fell on Houffalize defies easy comprehension. American artillery records, compiled post-war document, approximately 160,000 shells fired at or near Houffalize between December 16th, 1944 and January 18th, 1945. German artillery, though less thoroughly documented, probably contributed another 40,000 shells. Allied aerial bombing, though less intense than artillery, added approximately 400 tons of ordnance. Converting shells to explosive tonnage requires estimates based on caliber mix, but conservative calculations suggest approximately 2,800 tons of high explosive struck Houffalize during the battle. This is roughly 1 ton per pre-war resident, a metric that reveals the intensity of violence visited upon this small Belgian town. For comparison, the Allies dropped approximately 29,000 tons of bombs on Dresden in February 1945, killing tens of thousands in a city of 600,000. Houffalize received 10% of Dresden's tonnage, while having less than 1% of Dresden's population. The per capita explosive delivery rate makes Houffalize one of the most heavily bombarded locations in Europe. January 6, 1945, 10:30 hours. American artillery observer Lieutenant Robert Hayes, positioned in a church tower 5 kilometers from Houffalize, receives a fire mission that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Intelligence reports indicate German forces are using the Church of St. Catherine in Houffalize as an observation post, directing artillery fire on American positions. Hayes is ordered to call fire on the church and destroy it. He raises his binoculars and studies the target, a 1,200-year-old Romanesque structure, one of Belgium's architectural treasures, a building that survived the 100 Years' War, the Wars of Spanish Succession, the Napoleonic Wars, and the First World War. Hayes is 23 years old, an art history major at Princeton before the war, someone who spent college years studying exactly these kinds of medieval buildings. He knows what he's about to destroy is irreplaceable. He also knows that American soldiers are dying from artillery fire directed from that church tower. He radios the coordinates. 4 batteries respond, 16 guns, firing for effect, 64 shells, 105mm high explosive, strike the Church of St. Catherine over 3 minutes. When the smoke clears, the 1,200-year-old tower has collapsed into the nave. Hayes lowers his binoculars and vomits. The civilian casualty statistics for Houffalize remain disputed because chaos prevented accurate record-keeping, but post-war Belgian government investigation established minimum confirmed numbers. Of the approximately 2,800 residents present on December 15, 1944, only 89 were confirmed in Houffalize on January 18, 1945. 378 civilians are confirmed dead, their bodies recovered and identified during post-battle cleanup. 2,380 residents are classified as evacuated, missing, or status unknown. The 378 confirmed dead break down by cause, 180 killed in basements during artillery bombardment, 122 caught in the open by shellfire or small arms, 76 executed by German forces on suspicion of resistance activity. The age distribution is particularly tragic: 63 children under age 12, 97 civilians over age 60, suggesting the most vulnerable suffered disproportionately. The experience of Leon Henrad, a 47-year-old baker, typifies the civilian nightmare. Henrad's family, his wife and 3 children, sheltered in their basement from December 16th through January 12th, surviving on stored food and water collected from melted snow. On January 12th, during a brief lull in fighting, Henrad emerged to assess damage and search for additional food. He found his bakery destroyed, the building collapsed into its own foundation. He found his neighbors' homes similarly destroyed. He found bodies in the rubble, people he'd known his entire life, crushed by falling masonry or burned in fires he'd been powerless to fight. He returned to his basement and told his family they needed to evacuate immediately, that staying meant certain death. They left that night, walking westward through ruins and minefields. Guided only by intuition and desperation, they survived. Henrad's diary, recovered post-war, includes an entry from January 13th. Return to Houffalize today. Cannot find our house. Cannot find our street. Everything is gone. 800 years of history erased in 1 month. We are refugees in our own country, homeless in our own town. The cultural losses extend beyond individual buildings to encompass the accumulated heritage of centuries. The Church of St. Catherine, constructed beginning in 1193, contained frescoes dating to the 14th century, a carved wooden altarpiece from 1528, and stained glass windows created by Flemish masters in the 16th century, all destroyed. The town hall, built in 1531, housed municipal records dating to the 13th century, birth records, property deeds, court proceedings, the documentary evidence of 25 generations of human life, all destroyed or scattered. 18 buildings classified by Belgian historical authorities as protected monuments, structures deemed nationally significant for architectural or historical value, all destroyed. The commercial centre, shops and businesses operated by the same families for generations, all destroyed. Houffalize possessed an identity shaped by 800 years of continuous habitation, and that identity was erased in 33 days of combat. January 16th, 1945, 0 to 300 hours. The RAF conducts its final bombing raid on Houffalize. 40 Lancaster bombers dropping 400 tons of high explosive on a town that is already 90% destroyed. The raid's justification is military necessity. German forces continue to resist from the ruins, and aerial bombardment is deemed the most efficient method of suppressing that resistance. The raid's result is complete annihilation of the remaining structures. When the Lancasters depart at 0345, Houffalize has ceased to exist in any recognizable form. Aerial reconnaissance photographs taken at 0 to 800 hours show terrain that resembles the moon more than a town: craters, overlapping craters, rubble fields where streets should be, no identifiable buildings, no recognizable landmarks. The navigator on the lead Lancaster will later testify that he had difficulty confirming the target because there was nothing left to recognize. The town had become negative space, an absence where presence should be. The post-battle cleanup reveals the human cost in forms both statistical and personal. American civil affairs teams, entering Houffalize on January 18th, conduct systematic searches for survivors and remains. They find 17 civilians alive in the ruins, sheltering in reinforced basements or crypts that somehow survived. They find 243 bodies in various states of preservation, some identifiable, others known only by location and approximate age. They find artifacts of normal life interrupted, a table set for Christmas dinner, never eaten, the dishes now buried under 3 meters of rubble, a child's doll, clutched in the frozen hands of a 6-year-old girl, found in a basement, a wedding photograph, the couple, young and smiling, recovered from wreckage next to the bodies of an elderly man and woman who matched the photograph's subjects 50 years later. These personal artifacts, preserved by accident amid total destruction, are collected and catalogued, eventually returned to surviving family members or deposited in Belgian national archives as evidence of what was lost. The Belgian government's official classification of Houffalize as completely destroyed carries specific legal and financial implications. Only 3 Belgian municipalities received this designation in World War II: Houffalize, Malmedy, and Bastogne. The classification triggers special reconstruction funding, tax exemptions, and priority for building materials in the desperate shortage that characterizes post-war Europe. But no amount of money can restore what was destroyed. Buildings can be rebuilt, but they are new buildings on old foundations, not continuity but recreation. The town's character, its accumulated patina of age, its organic development over centuries, cannot be reconstructed. Post-war Houffalize will be a new town, planned and modern, bearing the same name but lacking the soul of its predecessor. Survivors speak of this loss in terms usually reserved for bereavement. They have lost not just buildings but identity, not just homes but heritage. By late January 1945, Houffalize is silent. The battle has moved eastward, following retreating German forces back toward the Siegfried Line and the Rhine. The town that was supposed to be captured on December 19th, that became the focal point of the largest American battle in the European theatre, that consumed tens of thousands of lives in its defense and reduction, lies empty and ruined. Snow covers the rubble fields, creating an appearance of purity that conceals the horror beneath. Somewhere under that snow lie the unexploded shells and bombs that will kill Belgian civilians for decades to come. Somewhere under that snow lie the bodies not yet recovered. People who will be officially missing until remains are found during reconstruction. Somewhere under that snow lies the town that died so armies could meet, the crossroads that geography made critical and war made lethal. The frozen silence is complete. The civilian catastrophe is over. The rebuilding and the remembering are about to begin. January 13th, 1945, 0 to 600 hours. The morning darkness over the Ardennes is shattered by the coordinated opening of 2 massive artillery barrages, one from the north and one from the south, both aimed at German positions defending the approaches to Houffalize. From the north, the 2nd Armoured Division and 84th Infantry Division fire every gun they possess, approximately 300 artillery pieces launching a 15-minute preparatory bombardment. From the south, elements of Patton's 3rd Army, the 11th Armoured Division and 87th Infantry Division add another 240 guns to the Symphony of Destruction. The timing is precise, coordinated to the second by field telephone connections that link Montgomery's northern forces with Patton's southern armies. The objective is simple and ambitious. Both forces will advance toward Houffalize simultaneously, crushing German resistance between them, meeting in the town's ruins, and thereby cutting off all enemy forces west of the link-up point. The pincer is closing. and the German forces in its jaws have 3 days to escape or die. The terrain between the advancing pincers favours the defender with almost malicious efficiency. The Ourthe River Valley creates a natural corridor only 3 kilometres wide at its narrowest point, flanked by steep ridges covered in dense forest. German forces, primarily the 116th Panzer Division's remnants and Volksgrenadier units, have spent the past 2 weeks preparing defensive positions that maximise these natural advantages. Every crossroad is blocked by fallen trees and mines. Every bridge that hasn't been destroyed is covered by anti-tank guns in concealed positions. Every ridge offers artillery observers perfect fields of fire across approaches enemy forces must use. The Americans and British understand they're advancing into a prepared killing ground, but operational necessity overrides tactical caution. The link-up must happen, and happen quickly, before German forces can conduct organised withdrawal. From the north, the American advance is led by the 41st Armoured Infantry Regiment, veterans of 3rd Armoured Division who've been fighting continuously since June of 1944. Lieutenant John Webster commands the lead reconnaissance platoon, 4 Mate Greyhound armoured cars moving cautiously down the snow-covered N30 highway toward Houffalize. Webster is 24 years old, a National Guard officer from Oregon who never expected to be leading the link-up operation that will close the Bulge. His orders are explicit: advance until contact with German forces, then report and wait for main body to attack. But Webster's experience has taught him that orders and reality often diverge. At 0 to 900 hours, his lead vehicle rounds a bend and encounters a German roadblock, 2 blown trees across the highway, covered by machine guns positioned in the tree line. The Germans open fire immediately. Webster's driver is killed instantly, the armoured car swerving off the road and into a ditch. Webster and his crew bail out under fire, taking cover in a shell crater while German bullets crack overhead. This is kilometre 8 of the advance. There are 8 more kilometres to Houffalize. From the south, Patton's forces face similar resistance. The 17th Airborne Division, making its combat debut, advances up the valley toward Houffalize against German positions that exact a terrible price for every 100 metres gained. Captain James Mitchell, commanding Company E of the 513th Parachute Infantry Regiment, watches his company, 180 men at dawn, shrink to 97 effectives by noon. The casualties are not from dramatic attacks or heroic stands, but from the grinding attrition of advancing against an enemy who knows every good firing position and has prepared them meticulously. Machine guns fire from unexpected angles. Mortars drop with uncanny accuracy on assembly areas. Snipers claim officers and NCOs with selective precision. Mitchell's advance rate averages 180 metres per hour, purchased with 2 casualties per 100 metres. The mathematics are unsustainable, but there is no alternative. The orders are to advance, and advance they do, over the bodies of men who bought each metre with their lives. January 15th, 14:30 hours. Elements of the 41st Armoured Infantry and 17th Airborne Division are within visual contact, approximately 800 metres separating their forward positions across the Ourthe River Valley. Through binoculars, Lieutenant Webster can see American soldiers on the opposite ridge, close enough to identify unit markings but separated by terrain that remains contested. German forces occupy a salient between the 2 American spearheads, a pocket perhaps 2 kilometres wide and 1 kilometre deep, and they show no intention of surrendering or withdrawing. The tactical problem is geometrically simple and practically vicious. To link up, one or both American forces must cross the intervening ground, and that ground is registered by German artillery and covered by interlocking fields of fire. The decision is made to wait for darkness, then send patrols from both sides to meet in the valley floor under cover of night. It is a sound tactical decision that will cost lives nonetheless. January 16th, 09:15 hours. Patrol from the 41st Armoured Infantry, 8 men led by Lieutenant Webster, meets patrol from the 17th Airborne, 7 men led by Captain Mitchell, on the N30 highway 200 metres south of Houffalize. The meeting is less dramatic than historical moment suggests. Cold, exhausted soldiers shaking hands, while artillery shells fall intermittently around them. Webster and Mitchell confer briefly, comparing notes on German positions and coordinating further advances. The official link-up ceremony, planned by higher headquarters to include photographs and formal statements, must be delayed 3 hours due to ongoing German sniper fire. When it finally occurs at 1100 hours, with division commanders present and photographers recording the event, the actual participants, Webster and Mitchell's patrols, are already back in combat a kilometre away. The symbolic moment has happened, the operational moment continues. The German forces between the link-up point and their own lines face the reality of encirclement. Approximately 18,000 soldiers remain in what is now officially a pocket, trapped west of the American pincer junction. Their options are limited and unattractive: surrender, breakout attempt, or defend in place until annihilated. Hitler's orders prohibit surrender. A successful breakout requires fuel and supplies that don't exist. Defense in place is suicide on an installment plan. Throughout January 16th, German units begin making individual decisions regardless of higher orders. Some attempt organized breakouts, company or battalion-sized formations trying to punch through American lines in coordinated night attacks. Some fragment into small groups, soldiers attempting individual escapes. Some surrender, white flags appearing on positions as soldiers decide survival outweighs duty. The pocket is collapsing not through American assault but through German recognition that continued resistance serves no purpose. The prison count reveals the pace of collapse. On January 16th, American forces around Houffalize process 420 German prisoners. January 17th brings 890 prisoners. January 18th brings 1,360 prisoners. By January 20th, the flow is slowed to a trickle. 40 prisoners on that day, most stragglers found hiding in basements or forests, too weak or traumatized to fight further. Total prisoners from the Houffalize pocket, approximately 11,200 soldiers. This number, combined with estimated 4,600 killed and approximately 2,200 who successfully escaped, accounts for roughly 18,000 of the 23,000 Germans trapped when the pocket formed. The missing 5,000 represent accounting errors, men listed as present who were already dead or had deserted. The inevitable fog of war translated into statistics that will never balance perfectly. The equipment captured in the pocket provides material evidence of German offensive capabilities' destruction. American ordnance teams, surveying the battlefield between January 18th and 25th, count and catalogue abandoned or destroyed German equipment: 287 tanks and assault guns, 512 artillery pieces, ranging from 75mm to 170mm caliber, 1,840 wheeled and tracked vehicles, and uncounted thousands of small arms. This represents the combat power of approximately 3 panzer divisions, completely destroyed. The tanks are particularly significant. Germany's production in January 1945 totals approximately 650 tanks for all fronts. The Houffalize pocket alone consumed 44% of 1 month's total production. These are losses that cannot be replaced, capabilities that cannot be reconstituted, the irreversible degradation of German military power. The final act of the Houffalize battle occurs not with dramatic assault but with quiet occupation. On January 18th, American infantry enter the town's ruins in strength, clearing the remaining pockets of resistance without encountering organized opposition. The Germans who remain are isolated groups of wounded or stragglers who offer only token resistance before surrendering. By 1400 hours, Houffalize is declared secured. The objective that was supposed to fall on December 19th has finally been captured on January 18th, exactly 30 days late. The cost of those 30 days is calculated in casualty reports that will shock even commanders accustomed to modern war's arithmetic. American forces committed to the Houffalize operation suffered 7,800 killed and wounded between January 1st and 16th. German losses in the same period totaled approximately 15,800. The exchange ratio, 1.3 American casualties per 2 German casualties, reflects the brutal efficiency of attacking prepared positions in winter conditions. The strategic significance of the Houffalize link-up extends beyond the tactical victory. The meeting of Montgomery's and Patton's forces eliminates the German salient completely, restoring Allied lines to approximately their December 15th positions. The month-long battle has ended in stalemate territorially. The Germans gained 0 permanent ground, the Allies lost 0 permanent ground. But strategically, the Germans have lost irreplaceable resources. The 98,000 German casualties in the Ardennes offensive, the 13 million litres of fuel consumed for no gain, the approximately 800 tanks destroyed, these represent capabilities that would have made the Rhine crossing far more costly. Post-war analysis by American strategic planners concludes that the Bulge offensive shortened the war by consuming German reserves that would have extended fighting by an estimated 6 to 10 weeks if used defensively. Hitler's gamble failed not just tactically but strategically, not just losing the battle but ensuring the lost war would end sooner. The human meaning of the link-up is captured in a photograph taken on January 16th by an Army Signal Corps photographer. The image shows Lieutenant Webster and Captain Mitchell shaking hands on the N30 highway, Houffalize's ruins visible in the background. Both men are smiling, exhausted but genuinely pleased. Neither knows that within 6 weeks, Webster will be killed during the Rhine crossing at Remagen, and Mitchell will lose his left leg to a mine at the Ruhr pocket. Neither knows they're shaking hands at the high watermark of Hitler's final offensive, the point where the last great German gamble crested and broke. They know only that they've completed their mission, linked up as ordered, closed the pincer that had seemed so desperately necessary. The photograph will appear in newspapers across America, captioned, "Victory at Houffalize, transforming military necessity into symbolic triumph." But the men in the photograph are simply cold, tired soldiers who want this battle to end so they can move on to the next one. The Houffalize link-up closes the Bulge. The pursuit toward the Rhine is about to begin. January 17th, 1945, 0 to 500 hours. The 82nd Airborne Division begins its pursuit eastward from Houffalize, advancing through darkness across ground that 1 month ago marked the deepest German penetration into Allied lines. Sergeant Matthew Ridgway, leading a rifle squad from the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, moves cautiously through a Belgian village called Charain, 6 kilometers east of Houffalize, expecting resistance at every corner. What he finds instead is silence. Abandoned German equipment, hastily discarded weapons, and signs of panicked retreat. A half-track sits in the village square, out of fuel, its crew having walked away rather than destroy it. A field kitchen contains pots of frozen stew, meal abandoned mid-preparation. Personal items litter the road. Photographs, letters, even money. The detritus of an army that has stopped caring about anything except escape. Ridgway and his squad advance 8 kilometers in 6 hours, a rate that would have been impossible during the advance to Houffalize when 8 kilometers took 6 days. The German retreat is accelerating geometrically, collapse feeding on collapse as units fragment and discipline evaporates. The Bulge is not being retaken through hard fighting, it is being abandoned by an enemy that no longer possesses the will or means to hold it. The contrast between the westward battle and the eastward pursuit reveals how completely German offensive capability has been shattered. During the advance toward Houffalize, American forces averaged approximately 1.2 kilometers per day against determined resistance. During the pursuit eastward from Houffalize, those same forces averaged 4.2 kilometers per day, a 3.5-fold increase in advance rate over the same terrain. The difference is not American strength but German weakness. The forces that defended every river crossing and village during their advance westward now abandon positions without fighting, retreat without orders, and dissolve as organized formations. The pursuit becomes less a military operation than a race to maintain contact with an enemy fleeing faster than pursuers can follow. Tank columns that spent December fighting for every kilometer now cover 15 kilometers daily, limited not by resistance but by fuel consumption and mechanical breakdown. January 20th, 1300 hours. Elements of the 1st Army and 3rd Army meet at Sankt Vith, the town that anchored the northern shoulder of the German penetration and whose capture cost thousands of American lives in mid-December. The recapture requires 1 day of light fighting, the German garrison withdrawing during the night rather than endure siege. When American troops enter Sankt Vith's ruins, they find a town even more thoroughly destroyed than Houffalize. 95% of structures damaged or destroyed, the civilian population completely evacuated, streets blocked by rubble that requires bulldozers to clear, but they also find evidence of German desperation. Abandoned supply dumps containing hundreds of tons of ammunition that couldn't be transported east, field hospitals where wounded soldiers too injured to move were left with medical supplies and notes requesting Allied care, and unit records showing formations reduced to 20 or 30% of authorized strength. The strategic decision facing Allied commanders is whether to continue pursuit or consolidate positions. General Omar Bradley, commanding 12th Army Group, argues forcefully for exploiting German weakness with immediate pursuit into Germany itself, across the Siegfried Line, and potentially to the Rhine before German forces can establish new defensive positions. His reasoning is sound. The German army in the west is shattered, reserves are exhausted, and continuing momentum could achieve breakthrough that shortens the war by months. General George Patton, never one to advocate caution, enthusiastically supports this approach, offering to lead Third Army to the Rhine within 2 weeks if given fuel and ammunition priority. But General Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, makes a different calculation. His decision, announced at a commanders' conference on January 28th, prioritizes consolidation over exploitation. Allied forces will halt at the German border, restore supply lines, repair damaged divisions, and prepare methodical offensive to begin in early March. The debate between Bradley and Eisenhower encapsulates a fundamental tension in military operations, the choice between bold exploitation and careful preparation. Bradley's proposal offers potential for dramatic gains at acceptable risk. The German army is demoralized and disorganized, precisely the condition that invites aggressive pursuit. Historical examples from Patton's August 1944 pursuit across France demonstrate what can be achieved against retreating enemies. Entire German armies encircled, tens of thousands of prisoners, collapse of defensive coherence. But Eisenhower's caution is grounded in harsh logistics reality. The Ardennes battle has consumed enormous quantities of supplies, particularly fuel and ammunition, which must be replenished before major offensives. Divisions that fought through the Bulge are exhausted, averaging 60 to 70% effective strength, requiring rest and replacement before they're combat ready for extended operations. The supply lines from Normandy beaches and Antwerp port stretch across 600 kilometers, vulnerable to weather and German interdiction. Eisenhower chooses preparation over audacity, a decision that will extend the war but reduce Allied casualties. January 23rd, 0 to 800 hours, the last German troops cross the Ourthe River, the pre-offensive border between Germany and Belgium, and demolish the bridges behind them. American patrols reach the river by midday but halt at Eisenhower's orders, establishing defensive positions along the West Bank rather than pursuing into Germany. For soldiers who have fought continuously for 5 weeks, the halt is simultaneously welcome and frustrating. They are exhausted, grateful for respite, but also aware that the enemy they're allowing to escape will fight again from new positions. Sergeant Ridgway, whose squad has advanced from Houffalize to the German border in 6 days, watches German soldiers visible on the opposite riverbank, close enough to engage but protected by orders not to. He later writes in a letter home, "We could see them beaten and running. We could have finished it right there, but we stopped, and they got away, and we'll have to fight them again somewhere else. That's war, I guess. The generals decide, and we do what we're told." The casualty statistics for the pursuit phase reveal significantly lower losses than the static fighting around Houffalize, but still substantial costs. Between January 17th and 31st, American forces conducting pursuit operations suffer approximately 8,400 casualties, roughly half the rate experienced during the Houffalize battles. German casualties during the same period total approximately 16,800. But the composition shifts dramatically. Only 2,500 killed, with 14,300 captured or surrendered. This 2-to-1 ratio of captured versus killed indicates an army that has lost cohesion and will to resist. During the Houffalize fighting, German casualties distributed approximately evenly between killed and captured. During the pursuit, soldiers surrender at rates approaching 6-to-1 over combat deaths. The psychological collapse is as significant as the physical defeat. The equipment losses during the German retreat create what Allied intelligence officers call the Trail of Tears, a continuous line of abandoned vehicles, weapons and supplies stretching from Houffalize to the German border. Survey teams following the retreat route count and catalogue the detritus: 1,247 vehicles of all types abandoned for lack of fuel, including 387 tanks and assault guns that represent irreplaceable combat power. Artillery pieces numbering 812, many intact and serviceable but abandoned because horses or tractors to move them have died or been killed. Small arms by the thousands, rifles and machine guns simply discarded by soldiers too exhausted to carry them further. The abandoned equipment represents not just material loss but moral collapse. Armies that intend to continue fighting don't abandon weapons wholesale. The Trail of Tears is evidence of defeat internalized, resistance abandoned, war accepted as lost by the soldiers who must fight it. The weather during the pursuit phase shifts from ally to enemy for German forces. The clear, cold conditions that grounded Allied air power during the offensive's first week continue through late January, providing American aircraft unrestricted access to German retreat routes. Fighter bombers from the 9th Air Force fly continuous patrols over roads east of the Bulge, attacking any vehicle movement with devastating effect. The standard tactic involves 4 aircraft working in relay. 2 attack, while 2 climb to altitude for next pass, maintaining continuous pressure that prevents German columns from making any progress during daylight hours. Between January 17th and 31st, American pilots claim 4,800 German vehicles destroyed, a number that post-war analysis suggests may be inflated by approximately 40%, but still represents catastrophic losses. The actual number of vehicles destroyed by air attack during the pursuit probably approaches 3,000, augmenting the 1,200 abandoned for lack of fuel. Total German vehicle losses around 4,200 during the 2-week retreat. The comparative analysis between German offensive and American pursuit reveals asymmetric warfare dynamics that will influence military doctrine for decades. The German offensive advanced 80 kilometers westward over 17 days, December 16th through January 2nd, an average of 4.7 kilometers per day, achieved through surprise, concentration of force, and brutal disregard for casualties. The American pursuit advanced the same 80 kilometers eastward over 14 days, January 17th through 31st, an average of 5.7 kilometers per day, achieved through air superiority, logistics superiority, and enemy demoralization. Both movements crossed identical terrain, but the pursuit achieved better advance rates with far fewer casualties. The lesson is clear. Attacking into prepared defenses is vastly more costly than pursuing defeated enemies. But the lesson also reveals its corollary. To create conditions for pursuit, you must first defeat the enemy through grinding attrition. Exactly what happened at Houffalize. January 28th, 1100 hours. The conference room at 1st Army Headquarters in Spa, Belgium, hosts a bitter argument between Bradley and Patton regarding Eisenhower's halt order. Patton, characteristically profane, argues that halting pursuit allows German forces to escape and reconstitute, transforming what could be decisive victory into temporary advantage. We have them by the balls, Patton reportedly says, and Ike wants us to let go and shake hands instead of squeezing until they scream. Bradley, more measured but equally frustrated, presents logistics, data supporting continued offensive. Fuel stocks are adequate for 2 weeks of pursuit, ammunition reserves sufficient for 1 major battle, and intelligence indicates German forces between the Bulge and Rhine are incapable of sustained resistance. But Eisenhower's decision is final, based on broader strategic considerations that include coordination with Soviet offensives in the east and political commitments to British forces in the north. The pursuit will halt, positions will consolidate, and the next offensive will be carefully prepared rather than hastily improvised. The final assessment of the Bulge campaign is compiled in late January by 1st Army intelligence officers, producing a document that will become required reading at military staff colleges for generations. The summary statistics are stark. German forces committed to the offensive numbered approximately 410,000 soldiers. Casualties total 98,000, 12,652 killed confirmed, 38,600 wounded, 30,000 captured, 16,748 missing. American forces engaged numbered approximately 610,000 soldiers. Casualties total 89,500, 19,000 killed, 47,500 wounded, 23,000 captured or missing. The exchange ratio, 1.09 German casualties per American casualty, reveals the offensive's failure. Germany, attacking with surprise and concentration, achieved slightly worse than 1-to-1 exchange against defenders who were initially outnumbered and surprised. For a nation with fewer resources and smaller manpower reserves, this exchange rate is strategic disaster. The pursuit phase ends not with dramatic battle, but with soldiers digging new foxholes along the German border, waiting for orders that will come in 6 weeks. They've retaken in 2 weeks what Germany took 1 month to capture, advancing faster and suffering fewer casualties despite moving over the same difficult terrain. The difference is not courage or skill, both sides possessing these qualities in abundance. The difference is resources: fuel to keep vehicles moving, ammunition to suppress resistance, air power to interdict retreats, and most critically, the knowledge that Every loss can be replaced while the enemies cannot. The Bulge is retaken. The Rhine awaits. But first, there will be rest, refitting, and reflection on the battle that was supposed to be Germany's last great victory, and became instead its final comprehensive defeat in the West. The pursuit is over. The preparation for final victory begins. February 1st, 1945. In a converted Belgian bank building serving as Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, a team of 23 statistical clerks works 16-hour days compiling the most comprehensive casualty analysis attempted during the war. Their task, assigned by Eisenhower personally, is to quantify the Ardennes campaign's cost with precision that will inform future operations and, eventually, historical understanding. The numbers they're assembling come from thousands of unit reports, hospital admissions, prisoner interrogations, and burial records. Each casualty represents hours of paperwork: name, rank, unit, date, location, cause, disposition. The clerks cross-reference reports against rosters, checking for duplicates where soldiers reported missing later turn up wounded or captured. They compile statistics by unit, by date, by cause of casualty. The work is tedious and emotionally draining, reducing human tragedy to columns of figures. But it is necessary. War demands accounting, and accounting demands precision. By February 5th, they will present Eisenhower with numbers that will shock even a commander who has overseen operations costing tens of thousands of lives. The American casualties for the entire Bulge campaign total 89,500 soldiers, a number that requires context to comprehend. This equals the entire pre-war strength of the United States Army. In 1939, which numbered 90,000 men, the Ardennes campaign consumed, in 6 weeks, casualties equivalent to America's entire regular army at the decade's beginning. The breakdown reveals the battle's character. 19,000 killed in action, the permanent dead who will never return. 47,500 wounded, ranging from minor injuries requiring days of recovery to catastrophic wounds requiring lifetime care. 23,000 captured or missing, most captured during the battle's first chaotic days when entire units were surrounded and overrun. The ratio of killed to wounded, approximately 1 to 2.5, is slightly higher than the overall European theatre average of 1 to 3, indicating the intensity and close-range nature of Ardennes combat. The Houffalize sector specifically consumed 31,000 American casualties, approximately 35% of the campaign total, despite representing less than 20% of the geographic area. This concentration reflects Houffalize's strategic significance. The town was not simply an objective, but the focal point where German offensive capability and American defensive necessity collided with maximum force. Breaking casualties down further reveals patterns. 3rd Armoured Division, fighting continuously from December 21st through January 18th, suffered 6,200 casualties from an assigned strength of 18,000, a casualty rate of 34%. The 82nd Airborne Division, committed from December 19th, lost 5,100 from authorized strength of 12,000, 43% casualties. These are rates that military doctrine classifies as combat ineffective, yet both divisions continued operating, testament to individual soldier courage and small unit cohesion that transcended doctrinal assumptions. The German casualty statistics, compiled through combination of captured records, prisoner interrogations, and post-war analysis, reveal losses that Germany could not afford and could not replace. Total German casualties for the Ardennes offensive, 98,000 soldiers. The breakdown, 12,652 killed, confirmed, 38,600 wounded, 30,000 captured, 16,748 missing and presumed dead. The higher ratio of captured to killed, compared to American figures, indicates the psychological collapse that characterized the offensive's final phase. During the initial assault, German casualties skewed heavily toward killed and wounded as units pressed attacks regardless of cost. During the retreat, captures predominated as soldiers surrendered rather than continue hopeless resistance. The equipment losses reveal material damage that translates to strategic incapacity. German forces committed to the Ardennes approximately 1,800 tanks and assault guns, representing roughly 40% of total German armoured strength on the Western Front. Of these, approximately 700 to 800 were destroyed outright, rendered completely unrepairable by combat damage or demolition. Another 300 to 400 were damaged, but potentially repairable. though Germany's industrial capacity by February 1945 made potentially repairable, largely theoretical. The remaining 600 to 700 returned to German lines, but many were worn beyond normal service life and would fail mechanically within weeks. Net effect: Germany lost effective use of approximately 1,200 armoured vehicles, two-thirds of committed strength. American tank losses totaled 733, all replaced by February 28 through new production and depot stocks. The artillery loss comparison demonstrates the fundamental asymmetry that doomed German offensive hopes from inception. Germany committed approximately 2,600 artillery pieces to the Ardennes, ranging from 75mm infantry guns to massive 170mm railway artillery. Post-battle surveys identified approximately 1,000 artillery pieces destroyed, abandoned, or captured, 38% of committed strength. American artillery losses totaled 590 pieces, all replaced within 6 weeks. But the comparison misses the deeper reality. Germany's artillery loss represents irreplaceable industrial capacity. The Krupp Works, bombing continuously by Allied air forces, could produce approximately 100 artillery pieces monthly for all fronts in early 1945. Replacing Ardennes losses would require 10 months of total production. American industry, untouched by bombing and operating at full capacity, could replace losses in 2 weeks. The material balance had shifted beyond German capacity to rectify through any realistic effort. February 5th, 1945, 1400 hours. Eisenhower briefs the combined chiefs of staff on Ardennes casualties via secure teletype. His summary includes a comparison that places losses in historical context. American casualties in the Ardennes exceeded American losses at Gettysburg by approximately 6,500. This represents the costliest battle in American military history, measured by total casualties in a single engagement. The comparison is sobering for political and military leaders who understood Gettysburg's significance to American national identity. The Civil War's defining battle, fought over 3 days in July 1863, cost the Union Army approximately 23,000 casualties. The Ardennes, fought over 6 weeks in winter 1944-45, cost 89,500. The scale of modern industrialized warfare has grown beyond anything Gettysburg's generals could have imagined. The fuel expenditure analysis reveals the Ardennes offensive's fundamental impossibility more clearly than any other metric. German forces consumed approximately 13 million litres of fuel during the offensive, operating armour, trucks, and support vehicles in sustained combat operations. They captured from Allied dumps exactly 0 litres, every targeted fuel depot destroyed before German forces arrived. The fuel transported from Germany totaled approximately 8 million litres, leaving a shortfall of 5 million litres that was made up by simply running vehicles until empty, then abandoning them. Post-war analysis calculates that sustaining the offensive to its stated objective of Antwerp would have required minimum 42 million litres. Germany allocated 6 million litres. The shortfall, 36 million litres, could not have been remedied through any combination of captured supplies and German production. The offensive was arithmetically impossible from conception, a fact that competent logistics planning should have identified but political pressure prevented from being acknowledged. The comparative efficiency analysis, conducted by Allied operations research teams, produces conclusions that will influence military doctrine for decades. Question: what did each side gain per casualty suffered? For Germany, 98,000 casualties purchased, maximum penetration of 80 kilometers, held for approximately 3 weeks, then lost completely. Net territorial gain, 0 square kilometers. Cost per kilometer of temporary penetration, 1,225 German casualties. For the United States, 89,500 casualties defended and recovered 80 kilometers of territory, destroyed German offensive capability in the west, and set conditions for rapid advance to the Rhine. Net result: strategic position improved, enemy capability degraded, war shortened by estimated 6 to 10 weeks. Cost per week of war shortened, approximately 9,000 to 15,000 casualties, a rate considered acceptable given alternative of protracted conflict. The medical statistics reveal warfare's human cost informs that raw casualty numbers obscure. American medical facilities in the European theatre treated 47,500 wounded from the Ardennes between December 16th and February 28th. Of these, 41,200 returned to duty within 90 days, approximately 87% recovery rate. 4,800 required evacuation to the United States for extended treatment, wounds too severe for theatre hospitals. 1,500 died of wounds despite medical intervention, injuries too catastrophic for even 1945 medical science to address. The survival rate, approximately 97% for soldiers who reached medical facilities alive, represents dramatic improvement over previous wars. In World War I, wounded soldier survival rate was approximately 83%. Medical advances, particularly antibiotics and blood transfusion, saved thousands who would have died a generation earlier. The psychiatric casualty statistics reveal costs not measured in blood but equally debilitating. American forces in the Ardennes reported approximately 12,000 cases of combat exhaustion, the period's term for what later generations will call post-traumatic stress disorder. Symptoms range from temporary anxiety and sleeplessness to complete psychological breakdown requiring psychiatric hospitalization. Treatment varied. Mild cases received 48-hour rest in rear areas, then returned to duty. Moderate cases required week-long treatment at division clearing stations. Severe cases, approximately 1,800 soldiers, required evacuation to psychiatric hospitals, often never returning to combat. The psychiatric casualty rate, approximately 13% of total casualties, indicates the immense psychological pressure of sustained winter combat. Houffalize veterans showed particularly high rates. Approximately 19% developed combat exhaustion symptoms, correlating with the battle's intensity and duration. The final accounting, compiled in a March 1945 report titled Statistical Summary, Ardennes Campaign, runs to 347 pages of tables, charts, and analysis. The summary conclusion, written by an anonymous staff officer, attempts to synthesize the numbers into meaning. The Ardennes offensive represents the largest and costliest battle fought by United States armed forces in the European theatre. American casualties exceeded those of any previous engagement in our nation's history. German casualties exceeded their capacity to replace or absorb. The territorial result was nil. The strategic result was decisive German defeat. The cost was terrible. The necessity was absolute. War permits no cheaper alternatives to victory. The report is classified secret and distributed to 27 copies. It will remain classified until 1968, when historians finally gain access to the full accounting of what the Battle of the Bulge cost the armies that fought it. The numbers tell a story that individual experiences cannot. This was industrial warfare at its most terrible human life, measured against strategic objectives, courage quantified in casualty rates, and victory purchased at prices that shock even those who paid them. February 8th, 1945. In a bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, Adolf Hitler receives a document he has demanded, but his generals hope to avoid presenting. The comprehensive assessment of Wehrmacht's strength on the Western Front post-Ardennes. The report, compiled by Oberkommando der Wehrmacht staff officers, is devastating in its honesty, a rarity in an organization where bad news often triggers execution. Of the 56 divisions rated combat effective on December 15th, 1944, only 14 retained that classification on February 1st, 1945. The others have been reduced to between 20 and 60% of authorized strength, lacking equipment, officers, and critically, the combat experience that made them effective formations. Hitler reads the report in silence, his hands trembling with the Parkinson's symptoms that are becoming increasingly evident. When he finishes, he throws the document across the room and screams at General Alfred Jodl, Chief of Operations Staff, lies, defeatist lies, reconstitute them. Order it done. Jodl, a professional soldier who knows that orders cannot create soldiers or equipment that don't exist, simply nods. The Western Front has become an economy of force theatre, a holding action with insufficient forces to hold, while Germany's remaining strength flows eastward to face the Soviet juggernaut approaching Berlin. The division-level analysis reveals destruction so comprehensive that reconstitution is impossible within any militarily relevant timeframe. The 2nd Panzer Division, which began the Ardennes offensive with approximately 16,000 men and 120 tanks, musters 4,200 effectives and 18 operational tanks on February 1st. The division requires 12,000 replacement soldiers and 100 tanks to restore combat effectiveness. Germany's total replacement pool for the Western Front in February, 8,000 soldiers and 60 tanks. Even if 2nd Panzer received the entire replacement allocation which it cannot because 27 other divisions require reconstitution, it would still be at 38% strength. The mathematics are impossible. The division will be redesignated Kampfgruppe status, essentially a reinforced regiment and assigned to defensive positions where its weakness matters less than its name. The Panzer strength comparison between December 15th and February 1st reveals the Ardennes offensive's material cost with brutal clarity. Western Front tank strength, December 15th, 2,300 operational tanks and assault guns. Western Front tank strength, February 1st, 800 operational tanks and assault guns. Loss of 1,500 armoured vehicles, 65% of strength. German tank production, January 1945, all types for all fronts, 650 vehicles. Even if all new production were allocated to the Western Front, which strategic reality makes impossible because the Eastern Front requires armour priority, German armoured strength could not recover to pre-Ardennes levels before April. But April is too late. Allied forces will cross the Rhine in March, and by April, German resistance will have collapsed into fragmented local actions by units with no strategic coherence. The fuel situation post-Ardennes creates strategic paralysis that no amount of tactical skill can overcome. Germany's total petroleum reserves, all types for all purposes, total approximately 9 million litres on February 1st, 1945. This represents approximately 1 week of Wehrmacht consumption at normal operational tempo. To build reserves for defensive operations on both fronts requires suspending all training, most logistics movements, and all but essential tactical operations. German forces on the Western Front are ordered to static defence, a euphemism for sitting in positions without ability to manoeuvre, counterattack, or conduct anything resembling mobile warfare. The Panzer divisions, elite formations designed for offensive operations exploiting speed and shock, become essentially expensive stationary anti-tank positions. Their strategic value, their purpose for existing, has been negated by lack of fuel to move them. February 23rd, 1945, 1800 hours. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Commander-in-Chief West, meets with Hitler to request permission to withdraw forces from positions west of the Rhine to create defensible line on the river's east bank. Von Rundstedt's argument is strategically sound. Holding exposed positions west of the Rhine requires forces Germany doesn't have. Withdrawing to the Rhine creates a natural barrier, shorter defensive line, and opportunity to concentrate limited forces where geography multiplies their effectiveness. Hitler's response is predictable and catastrophic. No withdrawal under any circumstances. Every metre of German soil will be defended. Forces west of the Rhine will fight in place until destroyed. Von Rundstedt, 70 years old and exhausted from attempting to execute impossible orders, makes a final attempt. Mein Führer, if we remain west of the Rhine, we will be destroyed in detail. If we withdraw to the Rhine, we might hold for months. Hitler's reply ends discussion. Then we will be destroyed in detail. Germany's soldiers do not retreat. Von Rundstedt salutes and leaves. He will be relieved of command on March 9th, replaced by Albert Kesselring, who will preside over the Western Front's collapse. March 7th, 1945, 1500 hours. Elements of the 9th Armoured Division's Combat Command B reach the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen and discover it intact, the only Rhine bridge captured before German engineers could destroy it. The tactical windfall immediately becomes strategic opportunity. American forces pour across the bridge, establishing a bridgehead on the Rhine's east bank that should be impossible. The German response reveals how completely Ardennes losses have gutted defensive capability. Standard doctrine calls for immediate massive counterattack using mobile reserves to eliminate bridgehead before it can be reinforced, but mobile reserves don't exist. The panzer divisions that should respond to Remagen are scattered across the Western Front at 20 to 40% strength, lacking fuel for sustained operations. The counterattacks that do occur are piecemeal, company and battalion-size efforts that are defeated in detail by American forces that grow stronger daily. Within 1 week, 50,000 American soldiers occupy the Remagen bridgehead. Within 2 weeks, the bridgehead expands to 100 square kilometres. The Rhine barrier, Germany's natural defensive line, has been breached because the Ardennes offensive consumed the reserves that would have made the breach impossible. March 22nd, 1945, 2100 hours. Patton's Third Army crosses the Rhine at Oppenheim against minimal resistance, establishing bridgehead that, within 48 hours, expands to division strength. The contrast between Remagen and Oppenheim reveals Western Front's collapse. Remagen was opportunistic, forces exploiting unexpected German failure. Oppenheim is methodical, forces crossing because German defenders lack strength to resist. The units that should be defending Oppenheim include remnants of divisions destroyed or depleted at the Bulge, 7th Army elements that fought at Bastogne, 5th Panzer Army survivors from Houffalize, Volksgrenadier formations ground down in the Ardennes. These formations exist on paper, organisation charts showing divisions and regiments and battalions, but paper formations cannot hold river crossings. The actual combat power defending the Oppenheim sector totals approximately 4,000 soldiers, with minimal artillery and no armour. Against them, Patton commits 30,000 soldiers, with full artillery support and air superiority. The outcome is predetermined. The strategic assessment completed by Allied intelligence in late March concludes that Wehrmacht resistance west of the Rhine has ceased to exist as coherent defensive system. German forces continue fighting, sometimes with fanatical determination, but their resistance is fragmented into isolated strongpoints with no operational coordination. The Ruhr pocket encircling Model's Army Group B in early April traps approximately 325,000 German soldiers who might have defended the Rhine line if Ardennes losses hadn't forced their commitment west of the river. Model, trapped in the pocket bearing his name, commits suicide on April 21st rather than surrender. His death symbolises the Wehrmacht's destruction. The general who planned the Ardennes offensive kills himself rather than face the consequences of that offensive's failure. The timeline analysis reveals the Ardennes offensive's paradoxical effect on war's duration. American strategic planners in post-war assessment calculate that the offensive delayed Allied advance to the Rhine by approximately 6 weeks. December and January, which should have seen preparation and execution of Rhine crossing, were instead consumed fighting the Bulge. This represents 6 weeks added to the war's length. But the same analysis calculates that German defensive capability was so degraded by Ardennes losses that Allied advance from the Rhine to the Elbe required approximately 10 fewer weeks than it would have if German reserves had been used, defensively rather than offensively. Net effect: the Ardennes offensive shortened the war by approximately 4 weeks, an outcome opposite to German intentions. The comparative resource analysis demonstrates strategic incompetence bordering on criminal. If German forces committed to the Ardennes had instead been deployed defensively along the Rhine, Allied casualties for crossing would have increased by estimated 50 to 75%. The Rhine crossing executed in March with approximately 15,000 Allied casualties might have cost 25 to 30,000 casualties if opposed by forces at pre-Ardennes strength. The defensive line could have held for estimated 2 to 3 additional months, extending European war into summer 1945. The political implications are significant. Longer war in Europe, delays or prevents redeployment of forces to Pacific, potentially affecting atomic bomb decision and Japanese surrender timeline, Hitler's insistence on offensive action against all strategic logic inadvertently shortened the war and reduced Allied casualties. It remains one of history's great ironies. Germany's last offensive accelerated her own defeat. The final Wehrmacht Strength Report, compiled May 1st, 1945, 1 week before German surrender, shows Western Front holding 32 divisions at average 28% authorized strength. Total effective combat power: approximately 90,000 soldiers capable of sustained resistance, equivalent to 6 full-strength divisions. These forces face Allied armies totaling approximately 3 million soldiers with complete air superiority and unlimited logistics. The ratio, 33 to 1, makes continued resistance meaningless except as blood sacrifice to ideology. The Hollow Army, gutted by the Ardennes offensive and never reconstituted, waits for surrender that will come in 1 week. The strategic consequences are complete. Germany gambled offensive capability for no gain and lost defensive capability in the bargain. The Western Front is finished. The war is over except for the dying, and soon even that will stop.